All right. Welcome everybody. It's a little bit after 7. We're going to go ahead and start the meeting. We will start with an invocation by Councilmember Ball, after which Councilmember Smith will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Dear Heavenly Father, we are grateful to meet together as a city council, along with our neighbors and friends, to discuss important issues relating to the city of Highland. We are thankful for the blessing of living in a free land where we can discuss these issues. We are grateful for those that serve in various capacities in the city, and ask that thou will bless them for their efforts. We ask that thy Spirit be with us, that we will have positive messages and positive attitudes tonight, and that we will be inspired to make decisions that are in the best interests of all of us. And this we pray for in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Will the audience please rise? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. We now have time for unscheduled public appearances. If there's anyone here who would like to address the council, they're welcome to come forward. And Candace, I did agree to let you, to waive the 3-minute rule for you if you want to come up, or somebody else.
So he's with me, I'm going to let him talk.
Okay, you don't need to come to the stand, just state your names.
Okay, I'm Candace Miller.
Okay.
And I'm Clayton Schmidt.
So I'm going to let him talk to you for a moment first.
Okay.
To kind of give you the best description.
Is that mic on, perchance?
It has a green light.
Okay, the green light's shining?
Yep.
Okay, just need to be closer to it when you speak is all.
Okay, how's about right here? Is that good?
That works.
All right, first off, I'd like to thank everybody for allowing us to speak tonight and giving us time. I appreciate that. I'm Clayton Schmidt. I'm here kind of representing Candace and Calvin Miller on a piece of land that they have. So what we've got is they're on 1.3 acres, just off of 6,000 West. And currently it's a field. It's got, weeds, and they had their horse in it, and a few cars parked on it. And what we're asking for is to take the 0.40 acres and make it a buildable lot. That would leave them 0.90 acres for the existing home still. So there's quite a bit of land still available. There are a few lots in the area that are significantly smaller. We've got a 0.34 acre over at 5738 West, 9970 North, a 0.39 acre at 5757 West, 9970 North. And they range. I've got quite a few examples of smaller lots and some that are approximately the same size. I have a current buyer for this lot. He would be building a single-family residential dwelling on the lot. So nothing's going to change really, other than it'll go from a field to a nicely landscaped yard with a brand new home on it, which would increase property values in the area, and the prices of everybody's home, I feel, would increase as we don't feel the lot would really raise property values just sitting there collecting weeds. Also, it would generate a new stream of revenue for the city on property taxes. And then what we're kind of running into is a variance issue. So we'd like to get a variance to make this lot buildable. There's no easements on it as per the property report, so we don't see it affecting like power lines or anything like that. The setbacks are good as far as not impeding on view of the road or anything like that. We don't see any traffic hazards by doing this. Let's see, these guys would never be selling the lot if it wasn't for the decline of Cal's health. They actually need this money in order to get Cal on the organ transplant list. Without the sale of this lot, they don't have the money that's required to place him on the transplant list. So it's kind of critical that we make an exception for this property, or if you guys could make an exception for this property, it would possibly save his life. Without this money, he will not be on the transplant list and will surely die. So we feel this is an exception here.
Rob, could you outline the process for getting a variance? Rob's our city attorney.
Yes, I can. Sorry, I don't have a microphone back there. So the variance process, thank you for coming to the city. I think the city council is interested in hearing, everything that you want to say. The city council, however, is not the body that grants a variance. The city has a person called the appeal authority who will review and decide whether a variance is warranted or not. There's an application you fill out, and you submit, like you did here in writing, the reasons why variance is necessary and should be granted for this particular property, and then he'll bring you in, you'll have a hearing with him and be able to present this, orally to him as well, and he'll make a decision on that. His name is Vaughn. He's our appeal authority. So that's the procedure to go about getting a variance where zoning, normal rules still apply to your property, but they make an exception because of hardship or other reasons.
So when the state prescribes some very specific guidance in what you can grant a variance for, correct?
Correct. The city code outlines all that. It repeats the state code. It's one of those things where by state law, the city council just can't stamp an exception. You have to go through this process. For whatever reason, that's the wisdom of the state legislature. And they require that appeal authority to make the decision rather than the city council.
Okay. So that's that process.
Okay.
To divide it other ways, we've talked about it would require a zone change to R120, which means you'd have to have a minimum half-acre lot size. And there's a process that goes through that really can't be shortcutted, and it does put some costs on you that are kind of expensive, the curb gutter and sidewalk. That's just the rules that we have, If you want to seek the variance, you're welcome to go that route. Anything else?
No, I'm just wondering why we showed up here. Did he not recommend we come here to ask for it?
Yeah.
I did not, actually. I told you what the process was. I said you were welcome to come if you wanted to speak.
To come and approach the city council. I was going to have everything wrote down, so I didn't just say things I didn't want to say.
So, can you put the mic, because we can't hear you. At least I can't, I'm sorry.
Oh, is that better? No?
I'd lean forward.
Okay. There were a lot of things that I was going to have written down to approach the city council, because this is not I want to sell a lot. I want to save my husband's life.
Understand.
Changing too many things around where we're at, putting the curb and gutter in, making it a subdivision, and adjusting the portions of the front of our property are not going to help him. There are side effects and things that happen when you're in kidney failure. They mimic
Dementia.
confusion and dementia. And if we were to change everything, it's not going to benefit him at all. And I understand there are laws, but we are all humans, and I'm asking you to take into consideration if this was your family or your friend or your neighbor, if you would not go out of your way to do what you could to help. I know there's processes. I know you want money. I know you need money. Everybody does. He served this city for 25 years as a police officer. I'm not here to just say I want to sell my piece of property. I'm here asking for help to find a way that everybody is okay, that he lives, the city gets revenue. People stop complaining about an old barn in a pasture. And I understand the processes you go through, but I also understand every one of you are part of the legislature, and there are things that you can do. So what I'm asking for is the help to find a way that everybody will benefit.
It seems like all that's happened is we get passed on from one person to the next, or you need to go do this next, or you're welcome to come here and speak. So we come here and speak, and then we just get told to go talk to somebody else. And I know they're frustrated. I'm frustrated. We have a buyer for the lot. We just need to know what we need to do and who we need to talk to get this done so he can get on the transplant list.
So we've outlined the variance process. I know you've been given the form for the variance already. And so that's option one.
That's a $500 fee. $500.
Is there a guarantee that they'll get that variance if they fill this form out?
No.
So it's a $500 gamble for people who don't have the money to gamble with in the first place. I guess what we're looking for is for somebody to step up and say, look, we can get this done for you. For sure, if you pay this amount of money, we can do this. And then they'll at least know what they need to do to get it done.
Well, for the options that you're considering, there potentially are other options, but for the options that you brought up today, you can go for the variance, and in the application, I believe it says what the criteria are that Vaughn can consider, and if you feel like you meet one of those, and you feel strongly about it, then that says maybe you have a strong case. My opinion, based on what I know, and I put this in an email, is I don't think you meet those, but that's my judgment, and I'm not an attorney. The other route is to subdivide the property, and that just, even if it was free, that takes some time because there's a process that has to be gone through. Public hearings are required. So that is going to go slower. But if somebody was willing to buy it as a non-buildable lot, that's a possibility.
I have a signed real estate purchase contract, and time is of the essence on it, where we do have a buyer. The buyer just needs reassured that if they buy the lot, they need it in writing that they can build a house on it.
Right. Well, that's to get that kind of assurance from the city, I know this isn't the answer that you're wanting to hear, but I don't know of anything that we can do other than what's been described.
What if you wrote something that said there's potential if they go through the process of getting the variance, they do what they need to do and follow all of your rules or what regulations, and they pay the fees to do a single home subdivision, put curb and gutter in, whatever they need to do. But the potential that they have the opportunity once they go through the steps.
I can't, that would be an opinion only. There's nothing I can say that would give a buyer assurance that they could build on that lot because it doesn't conform to the rules that we have today. I'm sorry. I can say just what I told you tonight. Here's the process, right? And what you've been told before, here's the process.
I really don't have, do you have anything else?
No, I think we need to get with Vaughn, it sounds like, and go from there.
How do you contact him?
Actually, when they fill it out, then we set up, Nathan would set up you just fill it out and then we'll take care of facilitating the hearing.
So we fill it out and then give it to you guys?
Give it to the city.
And then you guys send it to Vaughn?
Well, then we work with Vaughn to schedule a time to
Okay.
do it, and then that's how that proceeds.
And you have that paperwork already? Okay. All right, well, sounds like that's the answer.
Mayor,
Well,
I want to be sensitive, I believe it's Candace, is it Candace, is that right? I'm right here, it's hard with our face masks to know where we're at. I'm sensitive, I've met your husband Cal before, I appreciate his service, he's given many years here as a police officer in Highland. My heart hurts when I hear that he needs a transplant, and I understand that the real estate might be one option. I'm hoping you're looking at other options. That I don't know if there's some insurance out there that if you happen to be on an insurance plan, I don't know. I'm not an insurance person, but there's, maybe you could check with IHC. They are a nonprofit. Maybe they have some options there for you. Your doctor, and that's why I reached over to Dr. Smith, who happens to be on the council. I said, Scott, do they have other options other than just trying to sell this property to try to, because I understand your concern on the property, but my first concern is going to be for Cal's health, and I'm going, okay, we've got a person that needs to have a transplant, and I understand you're trying to resolve with the property, and I appreciate you wanting to pay the way, but maybe there's some insurance or some other programs to help you, and I'm sure you've looked at that. I just want to encourage you to seek some help. If there's some, go talk, Scott, where would they go to get help?
I have insurance. We just have to come up with 10%.
Okay.
And we have to have that in a separate account available before they'll do the transplant.
So the 10% you're trying to get is from the sale of this property. I guess the question I have, Nathan, this is for you, if that's okay, Mayor, if I can ask a question or two. So if they go through the variance process, how fast can that occur? Because it sounds like the Millers would like to move ahead as soon as they could. So what's the time frame on that?
Variance process can happens as short as the hearing can be scheduled within 1 to 2 weeks, and then a decision a week or so after that.
So within a month's time, at least.
Okay.
Because I think the other way of trying to get the property rezoned and then to put it in a subdivide that would be very expensive and take a long time because it'd have to go through all the hearing process. Yeah.
Yep.
I want to be sensitive and we don't give a false, Nathan, so if they get a variance, would that variance also mean they wouldn't need to put in curb, gutter, sidewalk, and not
All of it, assuming a variance would be granted, you still have the subdivision process to go through.
You're not talking that they have to come back to the city council. That process of going through a zone change is not there. It's just that they still have to abide by the zoning or the the development process that the city has to meet the codes and things that way, right?
Correct.
Is that, Candace, I know that it sounds like you've been here and been frustrated as you talked. Are you getting information to help give you some guidance here tonight?
Yeah, I got some information, I got some guidance, and I appreciate you letting me talk. And realistically,
So what is, just a curiosity question, 10% is 50,000, 100,000?
that's just for the surgery.
Right,
And then he has medications that are lifetime. With insurance, they're like $600 a month for the rest of his life.
okay.
So that's just the transplant surgery itself. And currently, he's got multiple other procedures he has to do prior to. So, I'm really not asking for special treatment, but there does come a time when people need to be humans. Because everybody forgot how to care about other people a long time ago. And it is so hard for me to stand in front of everybody and talk about this. You know, we can work with that. We'll figure it out.
Okay.
We can, I think one of their main concerns is their house is grandfathered in where it's at, and if we go the subdivision route, I know their main concern is that they're gonna have to comply with the new rules and ordinances that are required of a subdivision. And I've spoke with them about the curb and gutter and sidewalk that would need put in. There's currently 441 feet of frontage in there. So I called around to get it priced out, and that would run about anywhere between $20,000 and $30,000 to get the curb, gutter, and sidewalk done along that frontage. And I can work with them on that. I can work with the buyers on that, and we can get that figured out. I think one of their main concerns is their home no longer conforming to the new rules and ordinances, and them having to do more work to meet the new subdivision guidelines. So I think maybe, I'm not an attorney, I'm not, you know, I don't do legal stuff, but I know that's a major concern for them, because it's like, if we do this, it's gonna cost X amount, and then we're gonna have to do this, which is gonna cost X amount. And then, once we're a new subdivision, say a 2-house subdivision or a 1-house subdivision, then they're worried that they're going to have to put more money into it so it meets city guidelines and requirements. So I guess the question is, you know, where does it end, you know, at this point for them?
My heart is heavy, I understand. So let's proceed the way we have there. Again, there may be other options that come up, so we'll try and work on those, okay?
Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you for your time.
Any other public comment?
Thank you for the opportunity to just share a concern. My name is Allison Cook. I'm a resident of Highland City and the safety commissioner for the PTA for Ridgeline Elementary. Last Tuesday, a week ago today, we had a child who was hit by a car in an intersection that has really low visibility. It's off the school property. It's about, well, there's the school, Ridgeline Elementary, the church, And then there's Saltaire Drive, and it's 11800 North. There is kind of a funky visibility thing where there is a retaining wall, and then there is a 3-foot fence that becomes a 6-foot fence. So there have been parents for a while who've been concerned about the low visibility of children after school heading west on that sidewalk. So thankfully the child is okay, but we are trying to figure out how we can make it a safer place for children to cross. The school has had their student council do like a public service announcement teaching children how to be safe. And they've sent out a message to parents to remind them to be cautious with children. But there is still the issue with visibility. Some neighbors have reached out to the facilities manager of that church building. They are willing to replace the 3-foot section of the fence with a slatted fence, but I'm not exactly sure how much that solves the problem. If I'm understanding correctly, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I think that there is a clear view area for intersections, for corners of like 40 feet. And right now, that doesn't seem like it's, I don't know, from what I can tell, it doesn't seem like that is what's built in with the bearing wall, or I'm sorry, the retaining wall and the fence. So I'm wondering if there are a couple of things I'm asking for help from the city for. Is one, is there a way that someone could help us to see if that is being met, that guideline is being met, so that drivers can see children as they approach? And two, is there a way to add like blinking lights to the stop sign or additional signage to alert drivers to that this is like kind of a danger area? The other thing that I noticed was that that intersection does not have any painted crosswalk lines for children. I mean, I don't know if it will actually make the children stop. I mean, the parents have tried to educate their children, but they get excited. And I've noticed a lot of cars kind of roll through, and that's, I think, part of the problem is they can't stop in time because they can't see. So I'm just wondering if there are things that the city can do to help us with these issues.
There are, and I know the city is actually looking at it. Your email went out, and I know staff is looking into it, so I don't know where they're at. Nathan, if you have an update.
We don't have an update. We're working with police chief and our city engineer to look at that intersection and look at the site visibility and what else we can do at that intersection.
Okay. Yeah, I know I've been in touch with the police, one of the police officers who they sent me on to for like crossing guards to see if there was any availability, but they haven't been able to staff their current staff positions. So right now we're just trying to spread the word, but you know, that only goes so far when you're trying to get people to stop. So
Well, thank you for paying attention to this.
yeah. Is there any way I can follow up in the future?
Yeah, our city engineer has a quick update for you.
So, I received your email. It was forwarded to me. We looked at the sight distance. The sight distance triangle that we're talking about, the 40 feet, it's intended for oncoming traffic. Sadly, it is not for the sidewalk coming. We don't consider the sidewalk because ultimately the children are supposed to stop at that before they cross. And so, what we look at is we look at the curb on both streets. We measure 40 feet back and then make sure that there's no obstruction in that 40 feet. And the intersection meets that code requirement for oncoming traffic. It just doesn't meet the concern for the children. When this subdivision was developed, we actually asked the developer to work with the church to completely remove that wall. The wall wasn't there. We asked them to work with the church and just completely landscape that so it wasn't a retaining wall. The church said that they didn't want any part of that, just build a wall, put up the fence, and so that's what we did. We couldn't require the church to do that. Now they've, as you said, they've said they would come back and remove a portion of the fence. What we can do as a city is we can actually put a stop bar in. Not necessarily a crosswalk, but a stop bar a little bit before the sidewalk. We just need children to understand that they need to stop and then cross. but we can put in, and the church actually, in their email, actually asked us to put in the flashing stop sign as well. But the stop bar should fix that problem of the kids. And I don't know the situation. I don't know who was at fault. I just...
There was a child who went out
without looking, okay. And so ultimately, we just need to be more safe, but we have looked at it. It meets the code for sight distance, the current intersection.
So putting in the slotted fence would be an improvement?
It would be an improvement for the sidewalk, correct. And hopefully for the children to see the cars as well, but ultimately, we can't fix every solution, every problem, if you will, but we will do what we can as the city to make it more safe for children so that motorists know that they're stopping before the sidewalk, not just the road itself.
So the stop bar would go before the sidewalk?
Yeah, we would put the stop bar right there before the sidewalk on the south side, just so they would stop and then they would creep forward.
So,
Yes, yeah, that's the stop bar. So we don't normally put them on residential roads, but we can in this situation to try to help
And
the problem.
it's a slight uphill grade too, so that kind of compounds. They're looking uphill anyway a little bit as they're coming north.
In the sidewalk, yeah.
So the kids are going west, but if you come on Salt Air, you're going uphill a little bit as you approach 11800.
No, it's downhill. It's downhill.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Okay, because I drove that just the other day and,
Yeah.
oh, you know what? It was down.
Yes.
Yes.
Going
There's a change in slope. I just had it
to
backwards.
the north, it's downhill.
It's downhill a little bit, yep.
Any other questions, concerns, council, for me?
what's a stop, Scott was going, what's a stop bar?
Stop bar is when you pull up to an intersection, you will see a big white bar that really tells you where to stop at an intersection. You see them at most signalized intersections and larger.
Sometimes they even say stop in front.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's the big bar before the crosswalks, and we would just put one right across the northbound lane, right before the sidewalk. So when people come up to that intersection, they actually see that, and in your mind, you think this is where I stop. It's just sad that we had a child that went straight through and didn't look, and someone was creeping forward and hit the child. So, I mean,
So the accident happened right there by the church fence, and we have determined that the child just kept walking because they thought they had the right of way because there's a stop sign there.
They're just young and kind of one of those little children.
yeah.
But the parents in our neighborhood have said that they remind their children to stop and look, but, I mean,
They're kids. They act like kids.
So, Mayor, Council, we've looked into it. We will continue to look to see what will make it safer. But the church has committed to make the fence see-through, and we will go out and try to put a stop bar at this location to make it safer.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Todd.
Is that it, Allison?
No, or, yeah, pretty close. Just curious, is there any additional signage beyond like a painted on the ground? Is there anything, I guess you're looking into the lighted, like, okay. So yeah, so I think we just wanted to bring awareness and see what we could do.
All right,
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay. All right, council. Now we have the meeting, the presentation we've been waiting all year for.
Mayor,
Yes.
we do have one online participant. I just wanted to ask if they wanted to participate,
Okay,
if you don't mind. So we have one phone participant on Zoom. If you would like to comment, you can hit *9, and I can unmute you from there. I don't see anything. If I do, I'll let you know, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. So now with bated breath, we're going to hear our auditor's report for our 2019-2020 fiscal year.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. Can you hear okay? Does that work? Okay. So you should have a copy of the audit report in front of you. My name is Stephen Rowley. I was the engagement partner over the city's financial statement audit for the June 30th, 2020 year-end audit. Just a few things we're required to go over. It basically is that we report to you, members of the council and mayor, as you are governance over the city, and so we report directly to you because we work for you. So throughout the year, if you have questions or concerns about how the audit is going or concerns related to that, you can reach out directly to us. So as part of our reporting to you, We like to present the audit report, which is on page 1, which is probably PDF, page 5. I don't know if you want to pull that up or not, but you should have it in front of you, page 1. At the bottom is our opinion, and it states, in our opinion, the financial statements referred to above present fairly in all material respects the respective financial position of the governmental activities, the business type activities, the general fund budgetary comparison schedule, and the aggregate remaining fund information of Highland City, Utah as of June 30th, 2020, and the respective changes in financial position and where applicable cash flows thereof for the year then ended in accordance with accounting principles generally accepted in the United States of America. That's a lot to say that the financial statements presented herein are materially correct as of June 30th. As we go into the report, you can see the management's discussion and analysis that starts on page 3. That's very good information for you to review as council members as well as members of the general public to give you a layman's terms view, a 10,000-foot viewpoint of what happened in the city, comparing it back to fiscal 2019, so you can get a good idea of kind of what the financial highlights were and the reason for those changes from 19 to 20. Then you get into the financial statements that start on page 12, and it goes on. Those are very detailed. There's a lot of numbers there. So I recommend looking at the management's discussion and analysis first. And then if you want to take a deeper dive into the numbers, go into that. I'm sure Tyler would love to go into some long discussions about the numbers, and I'm more than happy to discuss those with you as well. Feel free to call me anytime during the year if questions arise. Additionally, there was one major change that occurred this year due to receiving the coronavirus relief funds, as the city had to undergo a single audit, and so that was some additional testing over how the city spent and used those federal grant monies up through June 30th, 2020. So we'll have an additional report to look at. But this next report is on page 33, and this is a report required by government auditing standards. And what this is we look at the internal controls over your financial reporting process. That's, what procedures do you have when you bring money into the city, and how you pay money out, and how you review those and prepare your year-end financials. So we looked at the internal controls over financial reporting, but we look at those to determine how much testing is required, but not to give an opinion on those internal controls. And so we don't give an opinion on the internal controls. As we did look over the internal controls, we did have some weaknesses that we identified related to those, and we'll look at that in our finding labeled 2020-001, and that's related to the financial close and reporting process. Due to the timing between when Gary left and bringing Tyler on board, there was quite a gap, and so there was a lot going on, and not everything got reconciled in a timely manner and prepared quite properly. There just wasn't time enough to do that. So that's the major cause for that. In talking with Tyler, we don't anticipate that being an issue going forward at all. So,
Can I ask a question? This is Kurt over in the corner.
Yes.
I'm the stepchild over here.
He's Kurt in the corner, I like that.
Kurt in the corner speaks. I'll take that as a Kurt in the corner.
No more kid in the corner.
We put some implementations in, I believe, over the last couple of years to try to do this checks and bounce. Are you stating that if we had not had Gary, who was our financial director, move on, that you felt like we had adequate checks and bounces in place? It was just because when Gary left and there was a gap there, that there was some financials being done that were necessary payments that maybe didn't have the two individuals approving things, and is that what you're stating?
No, there wasn't any issue with the controls over the payments or the cash coming in. It was just simply preparing the year-end reconciliations for the audit. That a lot of the checklist that Gary had and had been using over the years for just preparing those year-end numbers got lost in translation, and so some of that wasn't on Tyler's radar when he was going through and getting ready for the audit. So there was no concern over approvals of payments or approvals of financials and things like that. It's just as we got the numbers ready for year-end, that process wasn't fully there. So I've talked with Tyler and shared with him what Gary was doing to prepare for year-end. So He's on board with all that. He's got it on his list of things, so.
So when you did your audit, did you check to make sure we had certain double checks to make sure no one had one access to like the entire checking account or things? You tested that, correct?
Yeah, we look over the controls. When we say tested, we don't give an opinion on those controls, but we do look at that to see, is there proper segregation of duties that would help mitigate or prevent,
correct,
fraud or theft or misstatement, that type of thing. So yeah, we do look at that, and we did not identify any issues with that aspect. So the only weakness we found is, as we're discussing, just that financial close and reporting process itself.
Do you mind if I ask a question?
Yeah, please.
So I really appreciate all the work that's gone into this report, and I think as I study this and meet with our new financial officer, it's good background for next year's budget, of course. There were a couple things when I read through this the first time that I really don't quite understand. Can I ask questions about those real quick?
Sure, go for it.
Okay, on page 3, and we go through the financial highlights. It says Highlands, it's about third paragraph down, it says Highland City's total net position increased by $4,073,301. Majority of the increase was a result of assets contributed to the city from developers, increased charges for services. On page 5, when we talk about total assets and deferred outflows, we have governmental activities 2019, 2020. There's a difference in increase of about $350,000. And then if you go to page 10, I think it talks about the total capital assets actually dropping by, almost $4 million. So I don't know how that all fits together. In one place it says that everything increased by $4 million because our assets are up. And then when you go to look at the assets, they've dropped by almost that much. And then, if you look at the total thing, it's only increased by $350,000. So I'm going to have to sit down with Tyler to figure out how that works. But I just don't understand where that quote comes that our assets increased by $4 million when they don't seem like they did.
Yeah, so.
And the other part of the report. So that's kind of stupid questions probably, but it doesn't quite fit in my mind.
No, it's not a stupid question at all. And this is where accounting is a little, not necessarily complicated, but it's just understanding how it gets recorded. So when a developer completes the subdivision, they pay the cost of putting in the sewer lines, the curb, gutter, streets, and all that. When the subdivision is accepted into the city, and the city now basically claims ownership and responsibility for it, that asset is recorded on the books, but then also you get a revenue, because it's a donation to the city in essence. So that change in net position is that revenue portion that's coming in that we received. So that was higher, that attributed to a lot. So we can look at, on page 6, where we show, this is kind of a summarized income statement of the city as a whole. So if you're looking at the total 2020 column, up in that top section, under the general revenue, or let's see, no, under program revenues, the capital grants and contributions. So we received, now not all of this is property provided from developers, but the majority of this is. So $3.5 million was property received from developers. So that's assets as well as revenue. So now with those assets, there's also depreciation. So your fixed assets also, well, the reason why the fixed assets decreased is because we sold some land for, what's the name? It's the park, the
Spring Creek Park?
Yes, Spring Creek Park. We sold a good chunk of that. So that book value was removed on the books when we sold that. And we also had depreciation during the year of about $4 million. So all of that kind of combines to reduce our total assets, but the net position itself increased because we were contributed assets, so we had that revenue that came in that added to it, as well as the charges for services. So if we're looking at this same schedule that you've got up there, if you want to scroll to the right just a touch, we can see the change between 19 and 20. So we've got the charges for services is that top line, that $10,498,000 compared to last year's $9,819,000. So there was a $600,000 increase in charges for services. That helped. We also had $3.5 million of those assets contributed. And we did that operating grants and contributions, about $840,000 of that is the coronavirus relief funds money that came in. So that helped contribute to that overall increase. So I know that's kind of confusing. Does that kind of help?
It's clear as mud, but it's okay. I appreciate it.
I'm more than
It makes
happy-
sense.
I'm more than
Okay.
happy to help answer questions. I know Tyler would be happy to. as
Well, I'll have to sit down with Tyler. I just need to understand a little bit better. Yeah.
Yeah, excellent question. Thank you. Okay, so skipping back to page 53. So the second part of this government auditing standards report is we're looking at compliance with laws and rules and grant regulations that could have a material effect on the financials if there was non-compliance, or if the city wasn't complying with certain things, how it would impact the financials. So as we looked over those items that we felt were material to the financial statements, we did not identify any issues related to that. So the second part of that report, towards the bottom of that page 53, oh, I don't have the PDF page. Yep, just skip up a couple. And then it basically states, the results of our tests disclose no instances of non-compliance or other matters that are required to be reported under government auditing standards related to that compliance. So the finding that's related to government auditing standards relates to the internal controls, and the city's response is included in the report. And we'll touch on that very briefly after this next report. So the very next page is the new report that I mentioned that was required as part of the single audit. So as part of this, we look at two parts as well. We look at the internal controls over compliance with the federal grant guidelines. We know when we have federal money, there are strings attached. We have to spend it in a particular way. So we test, did you follow all those strings? Did you do everything that was necessary? As well as we test compliance with how you spent it. Did you spend it in the correct fashion on what the grant says you're allowed to spend it on? So as we look at the report here, the middle of the page there, our opinion is the City of Highland, Utah complied in all material respects with the types of compliance requirements referred to above that could have a direct and material effect on each of its major federal programs for the year ended June 30th, 2020. So that's what we call an unmodified opinion on compliance with those federal funds. So well done there. Very good job. That's what we like to see, and that's what the public certainly likes to see, that we spent the money appropriately. The second half of that report is the internal controls over the grant requirements, and we did not identify any weaknesses or deficiencies related to those controls. So that is also exactly what we want to see. There were no issues identified in all the testing we did related to the coronavirus relief funds. So very well done. There's a summary on page 57 that goes through basically everything that happened, what opinion we gave on it, which program was tested, the threshold for determining what needed to be tested, et cetera. And at the bottom of page 57, it does include the finding there that related to the financial close and reporting material weakness that we briefly discussed. You can read that there and the impact that it had on some of those. So in essence, what was necessary is audit adjustments were required to get the books in order and to get those things prepared appropriately, as some of the reconciliations had not been prepared in a timely manner. So the next page, page 59, is your schedule of expenditures of federal awards, and this is a summary of what federal funds were spent by the city during the year. As you can see there, we had the $823,000 of coronavirus relief funds that were spent. We passed through the majority of those to Lone Peak so that they could use that for their public safety uses. And this is just as of June 30th, 2020. So the remainder amount of the money that the city's received, that will be revenues and expenditures in fiscal 21. So.
Kurt in the corner. You have on page 59, you put down state and other local grants of $802,000. What's that?
I believe the majority of that is the BNC road monies, as well, and then you have, let's see, there's the liquor law funds that come through. That's also state funding. Trying to think what other specific state grants make that up. I think the BNC road money was like 600,000 of that, or 650, somewhere around there. So yeah, that's the majority of that. And then there's other.
We
state
get
monies.
some funding from the quarter sale county tax. Is that in there too?
That would be sales tax. So that's not necessarily a state grant money, that's sales tax that's charged.
Okay.
In our regular budget, you'll see line items under revenue.
Right.
And intergovernmental revenue shows that as a line item there.
Yeah, excellent question. Yeah, so that little schedule below is just showing how we get to the total grant revenues that show up on the financial statements of the 1.6. So we take the federal, add in the state, and that's the total grant revenue reported. So on page 61 is the city's corrective action plan related to that finding. Basically that they're going to have everything in order for next year, and we feel pretty confident that that's going to happen. We're excited to be working with Tyler, and I'm sure he's excited to be here working with you all. So, okay, the next report we're looking at is the State Compliance Audit Guide report on page 62. This also is a two-part report where we look at the internal controls over the state compliance requirements and then specific instances of compliance. And if you look at the indented section there, those are the areas that we're required to be tested this year. So we went through, tested the internal controls over those as well as instances of compliance. As we looked at the internal controls over compliance, we didn't identify any weaknesses in the internal control. However, there were some instances of non-compliance that slipped through the cracks that we'll discuss here. And in some cases, we did have to qualify the opinion related to budgetary compliance because there were 6 funds that were over budget. And those are summarized in the finding that we'll look at here momentarily. However, everything else, even though there was non-compliance, it did not have a material impact on the financial statements themselves. That didn't mean that there was any misspending of funds in terms of there wasn't theft or anything related to that. It doesn't mean that there was not proper approval of those expenditures, other than it wasn't budgeted for by the end of the year. And in talking with city staff, it seemed like the majority reason for that was, as Gary left before fiscal year end, I don't think the budget was properly reviewed so that it could be amended in time before the year end happened. So it's kind of a worst case scenario that happened at year end with that. So the findings are there on page 64 related to the state compliance. We had the Open and Public Meetings Act finding related to some minutes not being uploaded in a timely manner. I've talked with city staff and they're well aware of those requirements, and there was a little bit of a change up in that responsibility during the year as well. That may have impacted some of that, but I'm confident that that should not be a continuing issue for next year. The next one, cash management, was related to the deposit and investment report. That was not filed in the correct amount of time. It's supposed to be filed within 30 days of your fiscal year end. It wasn't filed until the middle of August, so it was late. But all the numbers on there matched up correctly, so that's what you want to see as well. It's just the timing of it, and the State Compliance Audit Guide requires that we write a finding if it's submitted late. And the last finding there is that budgetary compliance that we discussed. So the funds listed there were over budget. So I've already talked with Nathan and Tyler, and they're well aware of the necessary requirements to make sure that the budget gets properly amended to do all that. So I don't anticipate that being an issue going forward either. And again, none of these had a material effect on the financials. The numbers you see are reliable for you to use for planning, budgeting, for your bond counsel purposes, all of that. So overall, the audit went actually very smoothly, even with COVID preventing us from being here Majority of the time, we were able to come out, though. We isolated ourselves in that little conference room, so we were being cautious there. Everybody here at the city was great to work with. They were able to provide everything we'd asked for when we needed it. We had no problems working with management or any of the city staff, so we appreciate their hard work and their good work to get these financials ready for you today. So I'm here to answer any questions.
Can I ask another question?
Yeah, please do.
So there's a nice discussion of our bonds and different things kind of in the middle of the report in pages 37 through whatever. And I've got more questions for Tyler on it, because it looks like most of our bonds that we owe is about 7.135 million, which when I talked to him last Thursday, he said it was under 8. Certainly that's under 8. But the one question I had, even though we refinanced bonds in 2015 and 2020, my understanding is our bonds would be paid off by 2028. But yet on page 40, it talks about bond payments up through 2035. And owing interest of $30,000 and principal of $636. I was just kind of confused where that came from, because I thought all our bonds would be paid off in 2028.
Right, so those are the notes payable for the pressurized irrigation fund. So we have a note payable to the Highland Conservancy Water District, as well as a note payable to the Provo River Water Users Association. So those are notes. Your bonds, yes, those do end in 2028. But basically the Highland Conservation Bond, or not a bond, it's a note, that's the city's portion of the canal enclosure project that happened, what, 12 some odd years ago.
Right.
Maybe even longer, 15 or so.
Well, it happened when I was on the council before, so it's been about 8 years ago, really. But
Okay, so
I didn't realize it went out to 2035. Yeah, so that's something we probably need to discuss. Okay, that answers that, because I thought it was in with the bonds and stuff, so it is long-term debt, the notes, so, okay.
Yep, correct.
That
Excellent
helps.
question.
I understand it.
Any other questions? I'm here to help.
Seeing none, I want to thank you, Steve. I did see you in that office a lot, even though you said you weren't there that much, but you were. So thank you for your diligence and working with staff to make things better.
You're welcome.
All right.
Thank you.
Now we can check that box as one of our bucket list items that we've accomplished. Right, Brittany? This was on your bucket list.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
All right, next item is consent items. We have 5 of them, A, B, C, D, E. I know Todd wants to pull B and talk about that. So does anybody want to pull any of the other items, or are we okay to approve them? So I would entertain a motion for A, C, D, and E.
I'll make that motion,
Thank you.
that we approve consent items A, B, C, and D. No, not B. A, C, D.
And E. Okay, and motion by Scott, second by
I'll second.
Brittany. Are we voting electronically?
Yes, and I'm sorry, your names are apparently messed up again.
Oh, yes.
Aye.
Okay, so today I'm sitting next to Kai.
Kai and Britton.
It's not working.
Okay, so let's, you can just state your vote, Tim.
Yes.
Yes, okay. So Tim's a yes. That passes unanimously. I do want to thank Tyler Standiford for being willing to serve on the Planning Commission. I don't see him here, but I would like to thank him anyway, if he's watching. And would like to give a huge thanks to Chris Kemp for the work he did on the Planning Commission. Those that served with him know what a good chair he was, and he ran a meeting really, really well. I could take lessons from him. So maybe I'll just hire him as a consultant to help me run meetings. All right, Todd.
Mayor, can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Just a procedural thing. So when someone pulls something off the consent calendar, in the past, I've always seen a council member doing that.
Yes.
Can the staff pull it so that we can discuss it? I just...
Well, staff asked me to do it, so I did it. So I think the mayor can pull.
Yeah, I don't have any problem with it. I just wondered procedural.
Well, staff asked me to do it, and you'll see why in just a second.
Yeah, Mayor, Council, I appreciate it. The reason, Councilman Smith, is this is a moving target. We were able to meet with the pump contractor yesterday, actually. If you remember last council, I came and told the council and mayor about our current well situation, culinary well situation, that we're having troubles with our two main wells that we rely on heavily.
2 and 3.
The reason we felt like it was important to pull this is because the cost has changed since I wrote the report last Thursday.
And I'm sure it's not cheaper.
It is not cheaper.
Yeah.
Here's, long story short, so we can jump into the most exciting part of our meeting, impact fees. Culinary well number 3, we were able to, our contractor was out there all last week, got the well pulled, and what we thought was the problem didn't turn out to be the problem.
Well, this was where you said you're 95% sure it was the pump, right?
Yes, and I rely heavily on the people that work with me that are very good, but this was something.
That's why it wasn't 100, right?
This is something that we did not anticipate. There was a hole in the casing going down the well. Basically what happens is when we put the pipe back in the well, they're threaded together with joints and couplings, and what had happened, we don't know exactly what happened, but water started to make its way through one of those threaded connections, and with that pressure, it just over time, it basically wore a hole, and then once it wore the hole, then the hole got much bigger, and last spring when we saw the production of the well dropping off drastically, well, slowly over time, but drastically. As far as our pumping capacity, that is what was happening, and we had never seen that before. It's rare, and that's the 5%. Anyway, once we got the well pulled and took pictures, we realized what was going on. We went down and met with the pump contractor yesterday and went over our options. They supplied me a new estimate of basically everything to get us through. I apologize that the council does not have this, but I just want to go over some numbers, and I can provide this. But basically what's happening is instead of completely replacing the pump down in the bottom of our well, we are now going to be replacing the column pipe. And so what it does is we're going to get some cost savings on the pump, but it's a little bit more money to replace the whole column coming up. And so the cost difference, originally in well number 3, if you look in the council report that I provided, the cost was going to be $36,880. So that was the cost that we anticipated, but with the changes now, we anticipate that the cost now will be $49,793.16. So instead of the total for the 2 wells of $97,950.90 in your report, we are now looking at $110,864.06. And so basically the reason for pulling it is I just want to make sure that the council is okay with moving forward with the slight increase to get our wells up. And keep in mind, we've already asked them to move forward because time is the most important part here, that we don't lose well number 2 before we get well number 3 up and running. And so they've already moved forward with ordering some of these materials, but we need basically the ratification of this decision to award a contract for $110,864.06 to Rhino Pumps. Any questions? Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Any other discussion from council? I would entertain a motion.
Well, just a second, since we're talking about the water wells, I just, Todd, you mentioned that we have just 2 pumps going. You had some concern. Let me ask you, since we have a short water year, it appears, do we have any risk, since we're already going to be putting new casings and all that, is there a risk that these water wells, our drinking wells, could go a little bit dry, that we're not deep enough if we don't have a good water year?
No, because the aquifer, it doesn't rebound that fast. Not rebound, but interact that fast with our snowpack. Yes, it changes, and over time, our water is actually dropped, and that's why we discussed well number 4 and number 5 have issues because of that. Currently, well number 2 and well number 3 are deep enough that we don't have any current issues. Now, over time, it's going to be a concern, but we're talking many years down the road, hopefully. But that's why we're also talking about drilling a deeper well at 4 to get down to the aquifer in a location where we don't have to worry about that. But currently, we do not have time to completely reanalyze and put pumps deeper. These pumps, 2 and 3, will be good enough for the next 10 years. We try to get in each well every 10 years. That's kind of the maintenance schedule. So well number 2, it was about 8 years ago, 2012, that we were in that well. But this may be something that we do 10 years from now, Kurt, is look to lowering these 2, but that's not something we have time to adjust or do now.
Okay. But does it make sense to maybe start making a plan for well number 4? I mean, because the city keeps growing, and we have dry years and different things. Because I think it'd be a disaster if we run out of culinary water.
Right. And to answer that question, we are. We hope to bring back a well design and approval to drill a new well in the next couple of years at site number 4. But we've got to get these 2 up and running in this. I mean, it's an emergency situation at this point. So we've got to spend the money, get these up and running, and then we're going to look at drilling that new well. So.
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion.
Thank you, Kim.
I move that the city council approve and authorize the city administrator to sign a contract with Rhino Pumps for $110,864.06 to replace the pumps in well number 2 and well number 3.
I'll second it.
Is that the right amount?
Motion by Kim.
$110,864.06. Okay.
Motion by Kim, second by Scott. We need to go to another one? Oh. Okay, you still not working, Tim?
Not working, it's stuck.
Okay,
So, yes.
All right, yes. So Tim's a yes, that passes unanimously. All right, on to item 5, and we'll get to hear from Mr. Philpott on our impact fees. And before you speak, I would like to read an email that we got from the Builders Association, if I could. So let me get there real quick here. Sorry, I was not ready. Let's see. So here's a quote from Deanne Hewish of the Utah Valley Home Builders Association. On behalf of the Utah Valley Home Builders Association and our 600 members representing the residential building industry, I would like to thank you for your conscientious work for the citizens of Highland City. The staff shared with me the early drafts of the impact facility plans and impact fee analysis. I was pleased to see that some capital facility plans have been completed and that some new proposed fees for growth would be decreased, thus helping affordability for housing. The members and staff of UVHBA thank you again for your insightful and proactive approach as you plan with residents for growth. I would also like to thank city staff for sharing the reports early with me so they could be reviewed and input given back before this meeting. So that's a nice reply from an organization that's interested in this topic.
It's always good to receive some encouragement.
Hey, Fred, can you hit the button? There you go, thanks.
Sorry. Alrighty, I'll jump through a short presentation that summarizes the impact fees, the process, and where we landed on a typical single-family property, recognizing that the impact fee documents, the impact fee facilities plan, the impact fee analysis, and the ordinance are available to the public and to you. Many of the details are found in those documents. So I'll just be going through a brief summary of that. As you're aware, we've gone through this discussion, but for the benefit of the public, there are two elements to this process. We have to go through what's called an impact fee facilities plan, and then an impact fee analysis. The facility plan identifies capital costs, system improvements, and level of service variables. The impact fee analysis goes through the proportionate share analysis that allocates that cost to the demand variable for each of the specific services. This process is defined in statute in the Impact Fee Act. And there are certain elements that we have to include in the IFFP and IFA and your ordinance, and our documents, the documents that are presented and provided to the public, meet those requirements. Process-wise, we're here at the tail end, these last two rectangles, the public hearing, where you have the option to adopt, modify, or reject the impact fees, recognizing that as a legislative body, you can adopt something lower than the proposed maximum that we have here if you choose to do that. And there's no requirement that you assess impact fees at all. However, the statute does indicate that if you reduce impact fees or remove them, then you have to identify alternative funding mechanisms to maintain that level of service or show that decline in that level of service. And then the last element here is there is a 90-day wait period for any increase to impact fees. We are showing an overall decrease when you look at the summary of total fees on a single-family residential property, but some fees are going up and some are going down, so that creates some challenges where you may have some fees that you have to wait a little bit to assess that maximum allowable impact fee. This slide summarizes the significant changes from your previous study to what we are showing in the current documents, and why some are going up and some are going down. The impact fee eligible transportation costs have decreased, so that's resulting in a decrease to the transportation impact fee. The culinary water demand assumptions, as well as these system improvements or impact fee eligible costs, have also decreased for the culinary system. So those fees are also going down, and there's a specific service area subset of your city that pays that fee. The demand variables for the public safety impact fee have shifted over time. As we looked at call data and your land use types, some of those call ratios have shifted relative to the previous study, so there's some fluctuations in the public safety impact fee. With pressurized irrigation, that's one that's actually going up. The costs included in that analysis and all of the buy-in costs, when we pull all of that in, it's causing an increase to the impact fee for pressurized irrigation. Wastewater, similar to transportation and culinary water, the eligible project costs or system costs have decreased, resulting in a decrease to the wastewater impact fee. For Parks and Recreation, we are seeing an increase to that fee. We updated the analysis based on all the applicable buy-in costs and that methodology, and proportionally allocating that to the applicable demand variables, and that resulted in a slight increase to that fee. Again, when you summarize that for a single-family residential property, this is typically what we use to gauge the change, recognizing that different land uses will actually be impacted differently than this schedule here. So non-residential shows some different impacts, but on a typical residential property, we're showing across the board an 11% decrease when you sum all of the fees for the southeast service area, and similarly an approximately 11% decrease for the central service area. The central service area does not get assessed the culinary water impact fee, but they do get assessed the other fees that you see there. So there's a slight difference in the overall fee. As you can see individually, parks is going up, police, fire, we're showing a slight decrease for fire, a little bit bigger of a decrease for police. When you look at transportation, that's a big decrease. Again, that's driven by the capital projects that are included in that list, the impact fee eligible capital improvements. Water going down, wastewater, a slight decrease, but then secondary, the pressurized irrigation going up by quite a bit. So some shifting around with regards to the impact fees based on that proportionate share analysis, resulting in a slight decrease. Again, as the representative of the Home Builders Association indicated, that is viewed positively from the development community. But from an impact fee standpoint, what we have to ensure is that we are including all of the costs that we can from an impact fee standpoint, and ensuring that it's proportionate relative to, again, to the demand that we're evaluating. So those fluctuations and those variables have resulted in this change. This is also typical when you look across the state of Utah. Fees will fluctuate through this process, and from time to time, some go up and some go down. Again, it has to do with those assumptions that are used in the actual costs, capital costs for each of these services. Any questions on that?
Yeah, I had some questions. I worked through a lot of this. One of the questions I have, we're decreasing culinary water fees, and your analysis and everything was done through the year 2020, dated in December, but yet in the last month, we've got to come up with $110,000 in maintenance and all this stuff, and we need to talk about another well that we need to go deeper, well number 4. Does your analysis take all of that into account? Were you aware of those things? Because it seems to me it's probably not the best time to be lowering culinary impact fees. I mean, we're going to have to change. We're going to have to pay for this stuff some way, and we're bringing all these new subdivisions. Why would we lower our fees if we've got all these extra expenses? I guess I'm a little confused.
Yeah, so in the document, so we can reference this is just an amendment. So for transportation and culinary water, we just did an amendment based on the revised capital projects. But in the culinary water capital improvement plan, we have the Knight Avenue transmission line is the only impact fee eligible project, as well as the capital costs associated with this process, your impact fee facilities plan and your impact fee analysis. So if there are additional projects, we would have to go through an update, but we also have to keep in mind there's a difference between repair and replacement of your infrastructure and impact fee eligible growth related infrastructure. So I believe what's being presented, Todd, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but replacement of your system is not impact fee eligible. So we cannot take that project cost that was just discussed and try to recoup that in this analysis, because it's not
true. But
related.
if we don't, but all these new developments are coming in and are going to be benefiting from those. I'm just not sure why we would lower costs when we have to.
Yeah, so Scott, the current projects that were proposed are all based on our current level of service, and it's not growth related. It's failing system that we already provide that water source. The only thing that, Fred is absolutely correct, the only project that we have done or are currently doing in related to growth is the culinary line down Knight Avenue. So all of the other projects are going to have to be paid by user rates, not impact fees. And we'll get to that. We're going to be attacking our user rates shortly, and that's where you'll see these projects.
Todd, just a question. You're saying as we add, just looking at this ridge view, as we look there, you're saying that those 700 homes, we have the current water system in place. We don't need well number 4 to come on. Our well 2 and 3 that we go in will take care of all that?
So as the 5 wells that we had that were technically constructed for this, we should have capacity. It's the issues of the water tables dropping, not growth, that's creating these. Does that make sense?
Well, more users would bring down water table.
Yes, correct. I mean, and growing communities around us, like Lehigh City and some of these other central Utah water, drilling deeper and bigger, is really creating the problem. So
But it's growth related.
But the point is our current 5 wells should supply water to our entire city without any problem.
Even with all the growth?
Even with all the growth, yes.
So that's why it's not in the impact. I just was curious because of all these new expenses.
So one of the things that changed on the Ridgeview property, when the state first came to us and we did that first plan in 2016, they were looking at somewhere between 1,100 homes.
Correct.
And so the impact fee analysis we did was based on the requirements of serving them. It has gone down slightly, I think, with pressurized irrigation more than culinary, but
Culinary is part of it.
but going down to $6.99 plus some commercial was a drop in expectation, which is why the impact fees.
So Mayor, what you're saying is the last time we did the impact study, the impact we felt that was going to come from the Ridgeview area was 1,100 units, and because what was approved was 699 plus some commercial property, and I saw that in the report because it said it was based upon a reduction of density, so that was
correct. And that was a plan that they had presented. This is what we're going to do. So there was a strong foundation for saying this is what we have to plan for, and it changed in our favor.
Well, and then we got...
Or not, depending on your point of view. But
Canal Boulevard paid for by someone else too, which affects the transportation.
correct.
Yeah, the transportation is because we're completing that project, and so the need for that is going away. Is that right?
So what you're saying is the transportation, because the Canal Boulevard from 4800 to Alpine Highway was paid by county, and I think we had a small match. That's being pulled out because we'd probably budgeted in our impact fees that we might need to have put more money. Is that correct, Phil?
Yes, the transportation is slightly different in that the funding sources shifted, which influenced this calculation. So impact fees can only reimburse you for your actual costs, and so those updates, changing in funding and actual costs, resulted in the transportation fee going down.
Okay, one, I don't get sewer, because we keep hearing that TSD is raised rates to us, but yet you're showing that our impact, we're supposed to lower our sewer, our future impact sewers. Is it just because our future, we've already got the system built out?
So TSD system is different than ours.
Yes.
Okay.
So that's the difference. It's also related to density. So when the density in Ridgeview was lowered, the infrastructure demands were lowered. And we actually have costs now, when we did the projects, we actually have dollar costs now, which are reflected in the updates versus projections. Okay. So that's the other thing that you see.
Could you clarify this for me? Is wastewater synonymous with sewer?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I ask a couple questions just to make sure I understand?
Uh-huh.
So is it generally true then that even though the density of Ridgeview went down, and that's why impact fees went down, I mean, doesn't at some point it take the same amount of money to build like a road or connect a sewer or whatever? And so if you have fewer homes paying for that amount of money or that amount of road, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think you're talking about proportionality. And
Right.
If your demand goes down, your costs go down, but the proportionality should stay the same on a
Right,
per
because
unit
there are some
basis.
fixed costs no matter how many
Yes, but
go in.
with infrastructure, it's not quite that way, that you reach a threshold and you may bump up into another cost component that requires more infrastructure per unit based on those demand variables. So that's why this is kind of outside of my realm. The IFFP looks at that, the engineers look at that and say, okay, now based on these new demand variables, what is our new list of infrastructure, and has that changed based on those assumptions? In this case, the answer is yes. We don't need as much as we thought we did, and the sizing and type of infrastructure is now reduced, and that's reflected here. So that's one variable. But then the other variable is, again, is projected versus actual costs and funding source. So for roadways, for example, the answer is yes, the proportionality is the same, but the city's going to get money from somewhere else to pay for this, and so impact fees can't be used to pay for it twice in essence. So
Sure.
That's what's happening on transportation.
And then you just make assumptions about construction costs or whatever?
Yeah, so we'll look at, again, for some of these, it's actual costs where we're making an amendment to the culinary and the transportation impact fees based on actuals. But for the others, engineers, your engineering staff, Todd and Tavis will look at taking those assumptions and putting a cost with some inflation on that so we can pull in those future costs. And in reality, you'll get to that point and you may have to make some amendments or changes because costs could be higher than what are shown, in which case you'd want to capture that, or they could be a little bit less, and that's what happened in this case.
You know, Phil, one other question. So as we look at public safety, I'm a little surprised to see the public safety, and I understand maybe that's, you know, you've already got police cars, and so you're just replacing, but not adding. So this is just if we have to add services to our public safeties where we can assess the impact fee. It's not current service.
So public safety was actually purely a buy-in where we're looking at your existing infrastructure and saying that you had already constructed the new public safety facility and there's debt associated with that. And so we're pulling that in as the capital cost, the system cost for this analysis. What fluctuated there is really better data with regards to your calls for service and land use types, non-residential land uses. We had better data, and so we're able to allocate those calls and call ratios a little more specifically within the public safety, and so it caused some shifting within those fees.
But what you're stating is the new homes being built, we can lower our public safety fee because we're not going to have to, you know, let's assume we bring 700 homes and they want to hire one police officer. That means we got to go outfit that entire police officer.
No.
Or if those 700 homes, yeah?
Not to interrupt, public safety only pays for physical facilities. They don't pay for officers outfitting. They don't pay for vehicles or anything like that. They only pay for physical buildings. So Justice Center, a portion of that, like the court area, jail areas, they don't reimburse for, and fire station.
Yeah, so that's the challenge with public safety that most communities face, is the real cost there with regards to officers and equipment is not impact fee eligible. The only equipment that can be included is an apparatus, fire apparatus in excess of $500,000. So you can get the big ticket items there, and if we need to fund those, then we can pull those in. But police, all of their equipment is not impact fee eligible. So let me make sure I'm pushing the right button here. So finalization, again, as a legislative body, you have the option to adopt, modify, or reject. As I mentioned, all of the details with regards to the fee schedule, by land use type, so non-residential uses, that is detailed in the IFFP and IFA documents, as well as your ordinance. But again, you have the option to adopt, modify, or reject. You can modify it lower than the proposed fees here. You cannot adopt something that exceeds this unless we push pause and try to go through another analysis. And then any increase to the fee, there's a 90-day wait period before you can assess that increase. So some are going down. You can make those effective immediately. Those that are going up, your pressurized irrigation and parks fees, and those would have a 90-day wait period before we can assess that.
If they're going down, can we also wait on them until the others go into effect?
You know, the ordinance, or the Impact Fee Act says if there's a change to the fee, there's a 90-day wait period. But, so I'll let your legal counsel determine what that means, but we typically recommend any reduction is effective immediately, because a developer can present this study as the justification for a reduced fee, and say, hey, I shouldn't charge your current fee because you're...
But we can't charge what the current problem, if the fees went up, we can't charge the current fee.
Yes,
I mean, it sounds like, oh, we're going to give you a benefit. And I am worried, because if you look in 90 days, it's a huge build window where people could come in and pull permits, so we could get burned a little bit where we're not getting enough money on one, and so there can be a little bit of a timing.
Yes, and I totally recognize that disparity in that piece of the legislation, but
It is what it is.
Yeah, that's out of my hands.
So we'll get 700 permits done on March 1st.
Oh,
so.
good. Accelerated.
I think that's why it was put in the statute.
Any other questions for, and I'm sorry, I know your brother really well, so I forget your first name.
Fred.
Fred, that's right,
yeah.
Fred, sorry.
No
so
worries.
Fred, I'm sorry. That's why I said Mr. Philpott.
Yes.
Any other questions from council of Fred? Any other questions about the fees?
No, I just really enjoyed your report. I think you did a great job. It was very well laid out, simple and easy to understand, so thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
I will second that.
It was a team effort. Tyler and Nathan, we had to work together on all of that, and Tavis and Todd. So it took everybody here to get it to this point.
Well done, thank you. Council, a motion.
I think it's a public hearing, isn't it?
Oh.
Is it a public hearing? Yeah, we got to have the public hearing first.
Not on this, on item
This isn't?
6.
Oh, you lied to me, Kurt.
I'll make a motion then.
It is a public hearing. I apologize, that was not on the agenda, but it is a public hearing.
Public hearing, okay.
Oh, okay.
Then I will open the meeting for a public hearing. Is there anyone in the public that would like to comment?
The only participants we have online are staff members.
Okay. And I guess we don't care what they think, is that right?
It's Chief Thompson, so I don't know. I can't remember. Is his fee going up or down?
Okay. We do care about you, chiefs.
Just as a clarification, it is a public hearing, and it was noticed as such, so there has been ample notice of the public hearing.
You just missed it on the agenda.
Yes.
Okay.
So,
well, that's another-
Rob, since we're lowering these fees, because as we go in, we can't, some of them we can't, like our parks and the pressurized irrigation, we've got to wait 90 days, but we're lowering the other fees, which some could be pretty hefty. Can we say everything goes effective in 90 days, or do we have to have it be offset?
So, I mean, this was correctly stated. The state law says any impact fee enactment, any impact fee ordinance can only go into effect after 90 days. It doesn't say only increases or decreases anytime you touch it. So you could wait on everything. However, as a practical matter, I would not be surprised to have a developer come in and say, you just spent all this money showing that I don't need to pay for each house this rate. It's really this rate. And the current impact fee ordinance the city has adopted requires the city to make adjustments based on data that the developer provides, and the developer can basically provide our data that we have gathered.
So now I'm confused. So I guess the question that Kurt's asking is the 90 days we have to wait on the increases, but can all the decreases we can say 90 days too, or you're saying that the developer can come in and say, oh, you've decreased this one, so it's effective now. So I guess we just don't quite understand, are all these effective at the same time, or part effective now and part at 90 days? Excuse me.
By the law, the entire, whatever you decide to adopt tonight will only go into effect within 90 days.
90 days. So the decreases, the increases, 90 days.
But
do we need to put that part of our motion?
I believe it is in
state code.
With state code, and we put it in the actual ordinance itself that it will take effect within 90 days.
But we don't need, in our motion, do we need to put down all will be effective in 90 days?
You do not need to specify that. It's part of state law, and it's already in the ordinance that has been presented to the council, so you could just adopt the ordinance as written, just so that you're aware that there might be a practical decrease based on the findings that have been presented to the council.
And the developer could come and ask, we'll just wait till 90 days or 91st day and come and put your application then, because by state, it sounds like we have the state code to protect us, just you have to wait the 90 days, or if you're excited to get going, this is the fees.
Kurt, I really don't like to disagree with you, but here's the practical thing. I believe state code allows the developer, and our code allows the developer to say, your impact fee is wrong. It's too high. You have to charge me less. Then they could do that tomorrow.
But we can't charge them higher.
It doesn't matter. Tomorrow they can come in and say, you just demonstrated via your impact fee analysis that you should only be charging me X. So I'm going to ask that you only charge me X. And if it went to court, we would have to comply with that. So as a practical matter, the fees, the lower fees, become effective immediately. And the increases, the developer isn't going to come in and say, you raised your fee, I'm not paying enough. You demonstrated that I need to pay more, therefore I'm going to pay more. No, he's going to hold off on that discussion until 90
But if I was a
days.
developer and it was going up, I could run into 90 days and pay the lower fee. I'm just saying, my question, this is for legal counsel. You told us we can make it effective in 90 days. Do we have legal basis if someone comes in the 90-day time period? And maybe we're really discussing something that might really not happen too much, but March 1st or even February, we might start getting permits. Can we have the fees go there, and do we have a legal stance to state, yes, it's 90 days?
And maybe I'm misunderstanding.
The state code states that we can have
Yes,
it going
we can
effect-
say this new impact fee enactment, the analysis, the plan does not go into effect until March 19th, or whatever the exact 90 days is.
It'd be April. It'd be April.
April, I can't count, so thank you. So yes, we'll say that. Until then, we're still operating on the old fee statute. The issue is the developer can always say, you have to justify your impact fees, and you have justified it just recently, even though legally that's not in effect yet. I can show, using your own data, that I don't need to pay this much for my X fee. And if they come in and do that, we can try and fight them on it. The question is whether we would want to or not. My recommendation is adopt the fee. According to state law, it'll be 90 days, and we will address that situation if a developer comes in and requests an accommodation, as we are required to give them based on data that they present.
So I guess the concern we have, and I think what Kurt's saying, is we're lowering many of the fees, and the mayor's making the argument that if they came and contested, they'd get the lower fees on these others. But if they got those lower fees, they'd also get lower fees on the transportation and the other one, because that doesn't really go in effect for 90 days. So it's a boon right now if you're a developer, because you're going to get all the stuff cheaper, right?
Yes. The problem is each fee is separate. In terms of a developer coming in, while we lump it together and say your impact fees are X dollars total for all of your units, The way the law looks at it is you have a culinary water impact fee, and you have to justify that with data specifically for the culinary.
We understand that.
So yes, it is going to be a boon to the developer if they can come in and say, great, I can show that these fees should be lower, and I'm going to go buy your old fee.
For the culinary and the
Correct.
other one. So if they came the next 3 months, it's a real boon for them.
Yep, and that's just the way the state law works. We cannot make all of the fees effective immediately, but as a practical matter, the decrease will go into effect.
Okay, that's not, what I heard is state code goes into effect in 90 days. I recognize the developer can come and ask, but we have a legal basis why we didn't do it and why we're charging what we're charging.
But we would not have a legal basis to say, we can continue to charge you a higher fee when you have provided data to show that the fee should be lower.
But we can't charge them a higher fee. Right
Till
now.
90 days.
Yeah, so pressurized irrigation's costing an extra $1,000, and Parks and Recs are costing extra $1,500. So we got a $2,500 there. They could get a $2,500 savings, plus they get the lower fees. Because they didn't pay the $2,500 higher.
Well, because they're not going to contest those higher ones. It's each individual, so they can prove, hey, this is supposed to be lower on this one, this is supposed to be lower on this one. Those ones that go up, I'm not going to just touch that and contest it.
And I know that it doesn't sound like, Mayor, it doesn't sound like much. We do have Ridgeview that might come in with 100 permits here in the next 90 days.
So there's a couple of ways to look at this. Entities will look at maybe a single developer and enter developer agreements to address this issue and say, hey, we recognize that there's some changes here. In order for this to work, we need you to agree to pay the fees in our schedule and not try to game the system here. So that's one way to look at it.
But that's probably, if they're coming in 90 days, that was done 6 months ago.
Yes, I'm talking about, the future developers that will come in, and that's one way to approach this. So some entities will look at that. Okay. Others make the decrease effective immediately by practice, not by legal precedence, but by saying, okay, because you have really two conflicting elements within the statute. One is the 90-day wait period for any change. The second is that a developer can present information that suggests a different fee that the city needs to consider, and if it's valid, then an adjustment needs to be made. That information happens to be the studies we just presented, and so they could just hand those to you and say, I want a fee reduction. I think what you have to decide is if you want to allow that to happen from the developer's perspective, or if you want to do what other cities do, which is by practice just provide that. Because it's up to the developer to present that information to you for consideration for a fee adjustment. So it's from their perspective.
Now, is my understanding correct that the developer that can come in after the fact and say, you know what, I paid too high, I paid you the money, but you owe it to me back.
Exactly,
So
that's what I was going to...
As a practical matter, it just doesn't, in my view, we're wasting our time right now.
Yes, so I did want to point that out, that they have up to a year after they've paid the impact fee to challenge it. And so you would want to keep those monies set aside, and they could be potentially reimbursed. So it creates some challenges under that approach. So I hope that helps in your discussion.
Well, this brings up, Rob, do we have a liability on our transportation fee, which is $2,300, and I think it's $2,323 being reduced. Our road's not done yet, and so everything hasn't been paid. And so, I mean, that impact, I understand going, it's changing, but we're in the process of that change. Could a developer come back for the last year and ask back for $2,323 per transportation?
At the time that impact fees are determined at the time that they are paid, and at the time that they were paid, the data we had was, this is the impact that we're going to have. And they could have provided at that time a challenge saying, no, you're not really going to have that impact if they haven't done it. There is a time frame for them to do that, but most likely it's not going to happen because basically they agreed at the time, they said, yeah, we'll pay your fee, and we're not going to dispute that that's based on a reasonable impact fee, facilities plan and analysis.
So let me just ask a quick question. And when we're ready, I'd like to make the motion if we can, but you're basically saying because of state code, we can't, as a council, mess with the 90-day thing, right?
Yep, I would just say just adopt the ordinance as it's written and just recognize that we will.
Have some interesting experiences with it.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Ready for a motion?
I'll make it if I could.
Mayor, we need to close the public hearing.
Oh,
Public hearing closed. Thank you for your comments, public.
okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. I move that the Highland City Council approve the ordinance adopting an impact fee facilities plan and impact fee analysis that was dated 12/22/20 and imposing adjusted impact fees for transportation, culinary water, pressurized irrigation, parks and recreation, wastewater, and public safety.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion by Scott, second by Kim. Ready for a vote? And that passes unanimously. Okay, next item of business. Public hearing and resolution fiscal year 2020-2021 mid-year budget adjustments. Tyler? And when Tyler's done, then we'll do the public hearing.
Great. Thank you, Mayor and Council. Grateful to be with you and appreciate all the work that the team has put together on a number of items tonight. And I appreciated the engagement with you all as we've discussed the priorities for the city and your priorities as a council. So to begin with, want to just briefly overview the budget and purchasing processes that the city follows. Budget, of course, establishes the overall financial strategy, and that is what you as the council set for the fiscal year. And anytime that we set the budget or adjust the budget requires a public hearing and council approval. That goes hand in hand with purchasing processes that by and large are internal, ensures compliance with procurement requirements and budget limits, and also, of course, the intent that you have expressed as a council for allocations of funds. So in that process, there are, of course, we will bring to council any expenditures that are over $25,000 at any given point, but also anytime there's a potential adjustment on intent of the allocations. Recent examples possibly to reflect on are the discussion on Christmas lights and adjustments there. So, like I say, by and large, those purchasing processes are internal to staff, but we're wanting to follow the strategy that the council sets out in the overall strategy. In keeping with that, we have here outlined a potential budget timeline here. Of course, the fiscal year 21 budget was adopted here in June of last year, and today we're considering adjustments to that budget. We will then begin development of the fiscal year 22 budget there with the events that you see described here on the screen, culminating in the adoption of the budget there in June of this year. So that schedule, of course, is subject to change, but the goal is to engage in public discussion and understanding your priority and have conversations about where you want those priorities to go. A similar calendar has been developed for the Lone Peak Public Safety District that coincides with these timelines to give the councils of Highland and Alpine City an opportunity to weigh in with those as well. So as we look at some of the considerations here, want to first look at the general fund tax revenue. Here in some preliminary figures that we've pulled, comparing where projections were actuals in prior year and where we're headed. In general, We are on target with the projections that were identified previously with regard to tax revenue, with the exception of sales tax. If you'll recall, the setting of the budget for fiscal year 21, COVID was new on the scene, and projections were estimated conservatively. As we look at the performance the first half of the fiscal year, we are on track to exceed budgeted projections by approximately $500,000, which is great. We're glad to see the economy performing that way. So that, of course, will require some adjustments there, and want your input on that.
So before you continue, I'd just like to note that that presumption of a 500K increase is a presumption that the economy continues as is. If there's any change in the economy, that could revert to a much lower number. So as we discuss things, I would say let's look at the adjustments that we need now and wait till later in the year before we plan for money that we may not have.
So can I clarify that? Because the 500,000 was what's come in this year, right? And then we were just kind of projecting maybe 226 to be happening every year, not the 500,000. Am I mistaken?
So the 226, you're correct, Scott. The 226 of the 500 were
probably going to happen every year.
Right.
Yeah.
We're anticipating, and that's based on the last 10 years. Year over year, we're seeing an increase on average of just under 7%. So that's the basis that we have used when we consider the 500,000 that we are anticipating the rest of the fiscal year, where we will finish at roughly $3 million of that 500,000 that's increased over the budget. 226 would be ongoing.
Right, so my point is that 500 is still a TBD.
Correct.
And if the economy changes, the 500,000 could become 400 or 350.
Correct.
Well, but I thought the 500,000 had already happened or was happening.
No, it's a projection.
It's a projection.
Projection until the middle of the year when you get the money, is that what you're saying?
So we have realized actually 4 months of the fiscal year when all the accounting adjustments occur. So we have 4 months of actual data within this
You're projecting that from the 4 months.
Correct. And going back as well. So we've taken more than just those 4 months, but either way you slice that, it still ends up at about 3 million.
So based on the current track, that's what we think we're going. But again, I just want to point out, the 500 is a forecast.
That's correct.
And so I would recommend that tonight, when we talk budget adjustments, that we just look at what council is, or what staff is presenting. Here's areas that we're seeing we're spending more or less, and make those adjustments, and then hold off on spending an increase until we know that it's really, really there. Now, some of that I think is going to be sustained because of the Wayfair decision, which put a tax on all internet purchases. So I think regardless of COVID or not, we would have had an increase. But we just don't know how much that is because of COVID and how it changed the dynamics. But we will know better. You know, every month we know better. So that's just my recommendation, that we focus the discussion tonight on things that staff brings up, and not talk about how we're going to spend the extra money, because we don't really know how much, we're not sure exactly how much that is yet.
So I guess I see the 500,000 is projected for this budget year, but we're 6 months into the budget year. How much of that 500,000 surplus have we seen? I mean, you've obviously seen some of it, or you went projecting 500,000. Have we seen half of it, or what do you? What do you
So
see?
we are able, with regard to sales tax, we're able to count for the fiscal year tax that comes into the city from September through August of the following year.
Even though our budget starts on July 1st.
Correct. And that's all a function
So
of...
there's always a lag in the sales tax by
Exactly.
3 months.
Right. So that 2 months lag impacts when we can actually realize the income. So if you go back and look at 6 months of data from this point, go back to July 1, that trend, we've received $1.5 million roughly. If you go back 4 months, we've received 1 million. So 2 times the 1.5 or 3 times the 1 million using either, and that gives me comfort knowing that we're not looking at just one sample, but it's a trend that's demonstrated through multiple methodologies on that.
Okay.
So as you've identified here, of the 500, conservatively we're estimating that 226 will likely continue in future years and in future year growth. And for the time being, with all the variables in the current economy, we're recommending consideration of the remaining 274 as one-time funds. That could change in future years, but at this point, we'd recommend being conservative with that. So overall, here in what we're discussing, the approved budget for the general fund considered roughly $10 million, both in revenue and expenses. Here we're proposing projections of revenue at 10.5 million roughly, and expenses at 10.4. Herein you're seeing some of the conservative estimates there. We're not looking to spend every dollar at this moment, but as we progress through the rest of the fiscal year, that may become more appropriate.
So just, Tyler, I have a question. The mayor says we've got to be careful on this fight. So we have a 4-month data that we're seeing this tax increase. And I understand you're going, hey, we're going back with, and we're in the COVID. But we're now tonight looking at expenses that are $364,000 more than what we budgeted in June, just 8 months back. Does that mean, so what you're saying is we're adding 364, and we're hoping that we have the increase of 500 off of 4 months data?
Not just off of the 4 months, but going back to the 6 months, and even looking back into the prior fiscal year, that trend holds that increase.
My view is that 364 is, that 360 roughly is a reasonable number.
So as we look at the significant impacts, again, looking at sales tax, and then there's also CARES funding that we discussed briefly in Steve's presentation that I'll share some slides with you as well. So with regard to expenditures, staff is proposing within the general fund the following expenditures, which would we would incur a recurring cost year over year. First is an additional 1% salary increase for staff at a cost of $42,000 approximately, and that is in addition to the 2% previously approved by council. We revisited that there earlier in this fiscal year. Also, additional expenses there for salaries in the parks, seasonal. Here with the general fund directly, $15,000 combined with another $20,000 in the open space fund for a total of $35,000. And then here an expense with web hosting and domain renewal, they're at $650. So that would total approximately $58,000 in recurring expenses. Referring back to the pie chart, the 226 were well below that threshold there as far as comparing recurring expenses to the recurring revenues. Any questions there with regard to these proposals on this page?
So on the public seasonal expenses, and I'm just trying to, there was a little information that Todd sent to the council probably about 5:30 tonight. I'm just trying to understand, so as we look at that, we've approved 20, we're improving another 15 for 35. I asked about, hey, are we seeing, we've had a lot of comments from our residents about the parks being maintained. You know, so as a council, we see the importance, so we've put an extra 35,000, or at the time, we included, 20, which now would include another 15. Are we hearing from, I guess my question, are we seeing mowing happening more? I saw the hours, and I was a little confused here, Todd, because I see in 2019, we have a total of those are seasonal workers of 10,030 hours. Then in 2020 budget, we have almost 8,500 hours. Then we've went up to 9,500. We're actually less hours, from 2 years previous. Does that make sense, looking at your spreadsheet?
Mayor, Council, I don't know, Kurt, did this email go to the council? Your email?
Yes.
Okay.
You forwarded it, Nathan?
It went to the council, okay. Well, Kurt had some questions that and I apologize, I didn't send an email, I just meant to address them tonight. But his question was, has maintenance changed? And we looked, I sat down with Josh. In a couple years past, 17, 18 timeframe, we really struggled to be fully staffed. And in fact, I can't remember if it was 19 as well. 19 we were struggling. But the last couple years, this year and 2020, we have actually been fully staffed. And there were years where, yes, we went like 10 to 14 days between mowings. And we got a lot of complaints about the length of grass and things like that. Last year, we were able to stay at 7 days exactly. And so, yes, our level of service improved because of those, because we were able to fully fund our seasonal department. So another issue that we've run into is we had to increase wages to keep guys. And I've just written down a few of the comments that we went over. Seasonal employee wages are continually rising, and we're competing with that, especially if the current administration that's coming in changes the minimum wage. We're going to be in a world of hurt as far as trying to keep up with that, because we do not pay our employees that. We have also increased in the amount of mowing. Just in the last 2 years, I wrote down some of the locations that we've increased: Spring Creek Park, Highland Boulevard, open space, landscaping along Highland Boulevard, landscaping along 10400 North, and some landscaping along 4800 West, just in the last couple of years. You also asked, did the native open space get mowed 3 times per year versus once? And in fact, there were a couple years ago that we didn't get to any of it because we were so understaffed. We were just trying to keep up with mowing, and we did not mow any of the open space.
The native open space.
The native open space. This year, most of our open space received at least 2 or 3 mows. And so we're doing a much better job the last couple years with mowing open space, native open space. You asked, how did the parks management handle the extra employees? Did we raise seasonal pay? Yes, we did. And then the other question was, how many extra seasonal employees did we have? I know at one time in 2019, we only had 15 seasonal employees. This year, we had up to 23 at one point. So we're almost, 150% of years past. So that's where the money is being spent. I hope that the city council is hearing good things with that money being spent. I know that we feel like we're doing a better job, but there's always room to improve, for sure.
I think we're probably hearing less bad. We're not hearing not
No,
necessarily getting
and Todd, I want to give you a
compliment.
compliment. We had a work session as a city council. I think we talked about what do we want frequency on the native open space? How often did we want, things, you were asking about service level. And when I'm hearing we're mowing once a week, well, that's why I'm on my own personal grasses once a week. We're hearing that at least we got to native, which has been a complaint, 3 times. I mean, and I'm going, okay, to me, it sounds like this money, we're starting to see improvements. We got to keep the gas on. We got to keep making changes and improving it. But it sounds like we're in a good, direction towards our open space.
Well, and keep in mind, this has been a very good year for us as far as spending the money and doing a better job because of COVID. We were fully staffed early on, and we kept employees even after the summer. This has been a very, very unusual year for us. We hope that continues, and by doing extra funding like this, we can continually increase wages to be competitive and keep guys and continue to do the best job that we can. But this is money well needed to do what we're being asked to do.
I mean, when you talk about we must, and I can see that people are doing school online, because if you go back just the year prior to COVID, in August we had 2,600 hours being done by seasonals, and in September it drops almost 1,000. Well, this year we went from 2,500 down to 1,300, but in October we were able to get 1,700 hours into our parks, which, I mean, when you look back in the other Octobers, that's almost double.
Yeah, and exactly. We had some big jobs this fall with moving equipment, with prepping bathroom sites, with doing some of these things that we tried to keep our seasonals on to help with those things. And so that's mostly the reason, but we wouldn't have been able to do it otherwise without COVID. So
let me just and so Nathan, hear this. Can we, if you're saying that it was part of bathrooms, bathroom prep, doing some of the things that way, can COVID funds go towards that? I guess it doesn't matter the way we've been able to move things, but I guess that's a moot point because we got it resolved.
It's all one pot. So.
Yeah, and we've been able to handle the pot. I guess I keep thinking what was going on 4 or 5 months ago and trying to find the pot.
Great, thank you. Now, within the general fund, with regard to one-time expenses, here for this year, we're proposing some adjustments that council has already discussed, and actually has a net zero impact, but you'll see in the detail some adjustments with regard to Christmas lights and events, both on the revenue and expense side. Also, the front-end loader and backhoe for public works that council previously approved. We're also looking at some one-time expenses related to a couple of retirements with payouts on leave and onboarding replacements there here to retain some of the knowledge that they've acquired over the years. Also, an adjustment for traffic counters there. Their proposal, the mayor's has discussed.
So I would ask for an indulgence here and give me 5 minutes to go through that item.
Sounds great.
I put some sheets on your desks in front of you. So there are 2 separate issues that I've been lobbying with staff about, and they're just getting tired of me whining, so they put it in here. One of them is the current traffic counters that we use are the tubes that go on the ground or on the road. And when those goes in, they use 2 staff members to set them up, and they actually, Todd, correct me if I'm wrong, they nail it into the asphalt. So they'll have some off the asphalt, and then the end has to be nailed down so it doesn't move. And they do that on both sides of the road. And then they run it for 2 weeks, and then they take them out and they move them to another location or just store them until they're needed again. One of the challenges with the tubes are we can't really use them in the winter because if it snows and snowplows run, the tubes don't fare very well with the snow plows, and so we just don't really do traffic counts in the winter, although it might be useful. There are these little boxes, and the first sheet is I've looked into this, looked at a couple of vendors. This is from a vendor called All Traffic Solutions. That box is actually smaller than it looks there. It's only 6 by 4 by 5 deep. So it's a pretty small box. You can see on the pole that the guy's mounting it on how big it really is. It takes one person to mount it. It takes 5 minutes or less. The battery that it comes with can run about 2 weeks. You then take it down, extract the data, and you're ready to go. It's very unobtrusive. It works all the time. And on some of our narrower roads, it can actually capture traffic both ways. So we don't have to put it on both sides of the road. On wider roads, it's too wide to do both ways, so we would need to either put it on for 2 weeks in one place, then flip it, or buy two. They cost about $2,800 each. And that's really just a one-time cost. They do have a cloud solution that you can subscribe to that makes working with it easier, but we don't need that. So I would recommend we do this because, one, it saves manpower. Two, we can do it throughout the year. And I especially this year want to be tracking traffic in the spring and late winter around the roads that would be impacted by Canal Boulevard being finished, the east-west connector, because residents have been worried how traffic patterns are going to change, and I want a good measurement of before so we can track the after and then either say, you know what, it's not as bad as you thought, or maybe it's as bad as you thought and we need to look how to mitigate it.
So how many of these boxes are you want to buy?
Two.
Just two?
Two.
So that's a total expense of
so like
$2,800 a piece, basically?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's $6,000.
Right.
So these boxes you would situate in different parts of the city for different reasons.
Right, so.
Right now, probably maybe
do Canal Boulevard, 9,600, 68,000. Look at that. But in my view, it's been really helpful to have done that proactively, so when people come in and complain about how horrible their traffic is, we can say, well, actually, this is your traffic, and here's another road that's similar, and that's their traffic.
So you would move these around periodically during the year, so you just have two boxes.
Two boxes and move them around, and then the manpower requirements, it's not two people for, I don't know, it probably takes a half hour to get them set up because you have to have the distance right, and then you damage the road when you nail them in.
What's the maintenance on these boxes, do you know? Minimal?
Very minimal, yeah. It's just, you open it up, there's a battery, and then there's radar. I don't know what their failure is. They have a warranty period. But the tubes, they're much less expensive, but we go through them periodically. The other problem with the tubes, or a challenge with the tubes, is that people know they're there, and they might adjust behavior accordingly. Like, I remember being in a meeting where we were discussing traffic, and in this case, to make the residents' concerns were that there was too much traffic and it was too fast. So one of the residents who lived right where the tubes were made a point of every day speeding over those tubes. He said it in a public meeting that we actually videoed. Surprised he did that, but he admitted to it, but that is because his objectives were furthered by changing his normal patterns.
Most people won't recognize these boxes for what they are.
No, look how big it is. You wouldn't even notice it. So it's stealthy, if you will.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Maybe I didn't hear, but what's the degree of accuracy?
It's like 1% on speed,
On speed.
and 97% accurate on traffic counts.
And if there are multiple cars going at the same time, will it pick up both cars or just the one closest to it?
No,
Pick up both?
on traffic counts, it's about 97% accurate.
And then,
And the tubes aren't as good, because there's some variability. They're subject to wear and tear. And
sure, and then when you say cloud-based solution, you're referring to the software being cloud-based?
I'm referring to, you can buy as an add-on something they call Traffic Cloud. And then your data, you can get real-time views of the data on the
That's what I'm saying
boxes.
with it's not cloud-based, then how is the information downloaded or
It's
obtained by
stored
the
on the
city?
box, and then when you can connect to it via Bluetooth or with a USB connection and download the data.
Wait, so is it 6,000 for both of them?
Correct. They're
So what's-
2,800 each roughly.
What's the 16,000 for?
That is a placeholder. Now, we did have, and it's there for good reason, because we...
Shield radar.
we did have the same company that did the traffic study for the 10250 people that were concerned there. I talked with their engineer that did that, the traffic engineer, and he told me that they were working on offering cities a service that they would do 10 different streets for $1,500 a year. And that's the detail I had. What I missed, or what he didn't say, was for that $1,500, it would just be one 24-hour traffic count. And I don't think that gives us a complete picture. I think you need a couple weeks of data. So he said, if you want a 2-week traffic study, I would do the $1,500 per street. So if we wanted to do 10 streets during the year, that would be $15,000. Now, if we buy these on our own, it's a one-time cost of $6,000 plus. I'm sure over time they wear out and you have to fix things. And then, so we get paid back the first year compared to the $15,000 for 10. And I'm pretty sure we'd use it for more than 10 streets.
How much is this? How much is the cloud-based software?
That's about $1,500 a year.
You said $1,500
a year, but we don't, I'm not proposing that with these boxes.
Okay.
So these boxes, I'm just saying, let's just buy the boxes. You put them up for 2 weeks, you take them down, you pull the data, you recharge the batteries, and away you go. So I think that saves a little bit of wear and tear on the roads. I mean, if we're nailing stuff in, we wouldn't want our residents to do that, but we have to do it for
I
these
think it
kids.
makes good sense. Now, in your packet, you also have these shield radar speed signs.
Yes. so
Which I
that's-
quite like, because there's one on 700 North American Fork that really modulates a lot of people's behavior.
Yes.
Yeah, and I'd like to see something like that on Canal Boulevard, personally.
Yeah, so these cost, and there's a data sheet for those. There's 2 prices. One is with a solar panel to charge it, and one is without. On these, the company has an agreement with the state, so there's Utah state pricing for those, and that's why there's a $440 discount on them. They call it TrackStat, the little box that we talked about first. That's not on the state schedule. So the advantage to these are, they're easily put up, and this goes back, and you can move them, okay, you can move them, but one of the problems we've had with these speed signs, the feedback, is in some instances, kids take pictures of that when they're driving past to prove that they go fast, and then they share that picture with their friends. And that's been on Facebook. We put those up on Lighthouse Boulevard and Beacon Hills, and there were kids that it didn't modulate the speed, it did change it. It just made it, some kids would go really fast and have a competition with each other who could prove they went the fastest. It's
hard to fix stupid, though.
Yes, it is. So in an attempt to to mitigate stupid, you can't fix it. I had this, and this I think is subject for discussion later as part of next year's budget, but these have the ability to take pictures when you exceed the speed limit and record those. And then what I would like to do with that data, and this is debatable, and I know there are people pro and con this, I would like to send a letter to the owners of vehicles that are speeding to say, okay, on this date and time on this location, this car was tracked going 55 into 25 or 30. And I think parents might appreciate that okay, I have now independent proof that I can go to my kids and say, guess what? I'll do with it what I want, but at least there's empirical data. I know it's a big brother type of thing. State statutes forbids us from citing people based on that, but there's no reason we can't send them a letter. Now, that's going to have a bigger cost than just the equipment, because there'll be manpower associated with correlating that data and sending those letters. And I'd need better information to give to you. So I don't want to have a detailed discussion on that tonight. I just want to plant the seed that with those signs, we could leave them there permanently or we could move them around, but they also are camera capable, and we can take that data and then share it with the owners of the vehicles.
So, Mayor, maybe come back to Kim's question. We noticed we have a $16,000 budget adjustment.
That was just
a placeholder.
A placeholder.
Okay.
It wasn't that's what we want to spend.
But you'd like to buy the 2 boxes.
I would like to buy the 2. I'd like to just allocate $6,000 in case there's taxes or whatever. Or it's really $5,800, but.
And I'm pretty interested, I'm not real into Big Brother stuff, but I think these radar shield signs are kind of a good idea, because, living by the Canal Boulevard, which will be an access to the high school, that's a road that has several curves in it. The curves are nice because they slow traffic usually, but if it's young people, sometimes it doesn't. Right. And I think it'd be nice to be able to kind of track that a little bit, because there are some real danger spots on this new road.
So we can track that with either device. The feedback tracks it as well. And with the feedback, there's also the option to have a camera there and do something with the data. So I would talk about that as part of next year's budget, but maybe we just say we want these in multiple places.
I would support that.
But for now, I would just like it to be a 6K for using round numbers.
Okay.
Because I just think it's good to have data, because I just noticed that it's a lot easier to talk to people when you can say, oh, well, really, there is some speeding. It might not be as high as you think, because they'll give you those profiles of during this hour of the day, this is how much traffic there was, and this is how much traffic there was at this speed level, right? And they go by 5-minute intervals, actually. They can do it that.
Can I ask a couple questions?
Sure.
I mean, first off, I know all about these ones where they track your speed when you drive by, because Kim and I race on those all the time.
Don't say anything, Brittany. I can't have pictures taken of me speeding.
Kim and I, no, like,
I already
on
know.
Foot, Kim, on foot, we race.
I know how this works.
2 miles an hour versus 5 for
Yeah, Kim and I race on foot all the time. I guess my question, so you're just wanting to collect right now at this point information.
Right.
But there's really not a lot we can do with information at this point, because I know that every time we've talked about like a speed on a road, it seems like there are minimal things we can do, because we like our speed limits on different kinds of roads set at certain amounts.
Well, the other thing, and when we get one of those traffic reports, when we track, I do an analysis, and you've seen the charts and stuff. I send that over to Brian, and he can look at that and say, on this road, because there's a table that shows these hours of the days, on these specific days, there's more speeding than others.
They can place
so if he's planning where are we going to park people to watch speed, he can use that to guide him in where he puts people. So if we have these and use them more frequently than we do now, we can give him better data about where to go and where to be.
That that makes sense. My only other comment would be back to a conversation I had with a very, very wise man, Tyler. Yeah. And when we were talking last week about the budget adjustments, he said to me several times, and it makes sense, he said, everything is about priorities. So anything you want, you just have to be able to say, we're doing X instead of Y or Y instead of Z. So I guess, like, I don't think these are a bad idea at all. I guess my only question is, if we have $6,000 to spend on something, is this the number one need in the community?
Well, prioritize that against Christmas lights.
I believe Christmas lights is number one priority. Yeah. Dang it, I had my Christmas light necklace I was going to wear to this meeting. Aw.
I'm not saying it's not. I'm just saying that it was a question that Tyler told me I should think about.
Yes, and we should all the time. This is relatively small compared with other asks on a $10 million budget.
I can support the mayor on this, though, the more I've thought about it, because this is a safety issue. And I think as a city governing body, we really need to kind of find ways to help our citizens be safe. I mean, not a big brother way, but maybe a way to be able to track things and kind of point things out and kind of educate. I don't know. So I think it's more of a, I love the Christmas lights. They thought we got lots of positive comments.
More
and
positive
I hope
comments.
we do them every year, and I support them 100%, but I think this is important too. Yeah.
Okay, that's all I have. So go ahead, move on.
Great, thank you. The last item on this slide here, storage for parks equipment. We are building a new building, but this is to pay for the rental of a storage unit temporarily until that building is completed. Other one-time general fund requests, additional transcription. We have run through the budget for this year just about due to higher number of meetings and meetings going longer. We anticipate that we'll still have meetings in the last half of the year. Hopefully we do. So additional funding there. Sidewalk maintenance, this relates to some activity that was planned for 20. It actually hit in 2021. So we have, up to this point, exhausted about 80% of the budget and want to make sure that we can continue maintaining the sidewalks there through the rest of the year. And finally, some support for a meeting recording system here that's used here in Chambers. Became aware that support wasn't current and needed to make sure that was up to date. So all told, one-time general fund expense adjustments, not related to COVID, because we'll talk about those here in the coming slides, just short of $400,000 at $398,000. So with CARES funding, you'll recall council authorized use of the CARES funds to pay for public safety expenses. We were allocated approximately $1.4 million. From that allocation, the city will recognize approximately $900,000 in savings, not necessarily revenue, but savings this year, and approximately $430,000 next fiscal year.
Hold it, Tyler, can you go, $900,000 in savings, what do you mean by in savings? I mean, do we spend $900,000 for bathrooms, for windows? Is that what you're talking the 900s from? Or because you're using the word in savings.
Correct. Great question. And no, it's not the bathrooms. In savings, because we learned at the end of the COVID spending time window that we could actually use that for public safety. You recall that we received those funds much sooner. So that savings will come in the form of assessments to Lone Peak that the city will not have to pay for the remainder of this year. So
we're using the CARES money to pay for that, but we're also, separately from that, we're expending we're going to expend the 1.4 on other stuff. So we're saving it in one place and spending, so it'll be a net zero. Yeah, it's just confusing the way that, I have the same question, so thanks for asking.
So with regard to the expenditures, all of these have been discussed previously with council, in total approximately $1 million. The park restrooms, the public works trucks, PPE, Lone Peak, some direct expenses that they've incurred, some of which is PPE for Lone Peak. Front counter improvements, which are just about finished. The building disinfection system. Windows that have, we've got one remaining at the police station, but those provide for the ventilation, of course. Some contributions to local schools, and then some library shelving. So again, yes, the 900 in savings, approximately 1 million here that we're anticipating this fiscal year in expenses directly related to COVID on that line. Specific to some other funds here, we are asking council for a prior year balance carryover of $37,000. This was funds that were a surplus that the library fund had and was missed in the approved budget. Some proposed expenses here in the form of a book drop, public access computers and shelving. E-books that Don has indicated we're seeing more demand for due to COVID. Software for public access computers. Some printing expense that we're making sure is allocated properly to the library. Winter programming. Public access computers, making sure that those we are funding the replacement in future years appropriately. COVID grants, that is funds that were additional funding that the city has received there for the library just directly for COVID. Some phones to make sure they're not sharing, and then a reduction as they're continuing education, they don't need to travel as much. So all told, the expenses adjustments for the library would be $29,000 compared to that $37,000 at this point.
Can I ask some questions of Donna about the e-books?
Yeah.
So are these e-books that you're purchasing the rights to in addition to the e-books you can get through the state library? How does the e-book program work?
So what we've been doing is that each month we look at what books the people in Highland have put on hold through the overdrive.
Yes.
And we purchase additional copies of that our patrons get first. And so maybe they go from being number 20 out of 300 holds to being number 4 out of 12 holds.
Okay. What's the average cost of an e-book, or does it vary from the different kinds of products?
It varies a lot. An e-book will cost anywhere from, an older book could be as cheap as $9 or $10. A new book, like when Michelle Obama's book was really popular, her book was like $90 to get an e-book copy.
Is that a permanent purchase, or is it time-bound?
The popular books are usually a limited use purchase, so maybe you get to use them for 2 years, or maybe you get to use them for 24 checkouts, and then you have to pay it again.
So that $90, how many times could that book be read from that $90?
I'm trying to remember what that one was. I think that was a 24 use. It's expensive, but that's what people want.
So you were basically paying less than $5 an e-book, though, for that, right?
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah. But if the hard copy would cost, what, $25, $30 on that?
Right.
And then until it wore out, you could use it, right?
Right, and then we would have to replace it,
Right.
you know,
And
after.
then, but it doesn't take shelf space, so that's, there are pros and cons.
Yeah. What's that?
There are pros and cons to
Yes,
paperback versus
I mean, e-books are more expensive than print books, but it's what the people want. You know, no use filling your shelves with print books, and if they're not getting checked out, yeah.
Sure.
It's what I want, Donna. I'm on hold for at least 20 ebooks or something like that. They're never there. Thank you.
Yeah. Any more questions?
No, I was just curious how it worked.
Yep.
Thanks, Donna. Other enterprise funds and balances are available to cover these expenses in those individual funds. Some material cost increases there in the storm sewer fund that was specifically related to the NCRS viewpoint flood control, as well as reconstruction at Broadleaf Hollow. In the culinary water fund, urgent well repairs that Todd has discussed tonight already. Under Parks Capital, finishing up Spring Creek. And under sewer, additional engineering costs. And then under IT, some software subscriptions as the market moves more to subscription-based as opposed to buying actual ownership of any software licenses.
So, Tyler, I apologize for asking a question that I hadn't asked before, but Todd, do any of our budget adjustments cover the work in Kurt's area there, or is that already covered in the budget?
Yeah.
So it's already budgeted, we're okay, and and the costs are going to be, have we gone out to bid on any of that yet? Okay. Okay, so we don't know yet if what we have budgeted is sufficient or not. Okay.
Mayor, I just want it to be noted that the sewer that goes in there, I'm only 0.017% of that sewer.
Kurt, did you measure?
That's what my meters are showing. No. No comment on that.
So, Tyler, can I ask a quick question?
You bet.
Now you've presented most of this. Are your figures just mainly rounded figures, kind of close estimates? Because, I mean, earlier in the council tonight, we approved $110,846 for the pumps. You have it at $110,000. I mean, that's $1,000 off, basically. I mean, is this just kind of a close estimate? Is what we're voting on, or?
Yes, and there are some specific numbers within the detail, but even then, yes, we're making our best estimate of where those would line up.
Just for discussion purposes, okay.
Great, happy to take any other questions that you have. Otherwise, we do recommend, of course, the amendments that we've outlined here and in your packet for your approval.
Okay, so let me open up a public hearing. And Aaron, is any?
Again, all that's currently watching, at least via Zoom, is staff members, and doesn't look like we have a big YouTube participation tonight.
Yes, well, I'm surprised the audit report didn't draw a huge crowd. All right, then we will close the public comment hearing. Council discussion or a motion?
So my only thing is, I am totally in favor of your, the traffic counters. I think it's a great idea. I can see how it's a good idea to direct police to where they need to be. I also have decided that I'm just a pretty firm proponent of prioritizing needs. I know it's only $6,000, but in my world, that's a lot of money.
So what are we prioritizing it against in your view?
What?
What are we prioritizing it against?
I mean, I just think that every time you buy anything, you're prioritizing it against, do you want to hire an extra seasonal worker? Do you want to, like, plant extra trees? I mean, to me, there's, a whole list of priority things that we may or may not get to, and I'm not saying all that's going to get done without this. I just, I don't know. I just like a prioritization of needs, and then we do what is the top one. Now, I did vote for Christmas lights, so I recognize the inconsistency in what I'm saying. I'm just saying, like, philosophically, I like to prioritize needs, I guess, is all.
Okay, so prioritize.
Do with that.
So what do you want to do with that?
I don't know. I'm just saying.
Does that apply to all the other budget items too?
I mean, I would hope that prioritization should apply to everything that we do, shouldn't it?
Okay, so what are you going to prioritize those against?
I mean, is it as clear as like you have to prioritize it against something else that is in the budget right now or that we're voting on right now? I mean, to me, it's just $6,000 that we either spend on traffic counters or we don't spend it on traffic counters and then we have it to spend later. I mean, like, I'm not, convince me, I'm not.
I personally, I think it's a good use of money. It's going to save time. So there is some time savings involved. It'll save wear and tear on the roads. We'll be able to do something year-round instead of 8 months of the year. So to me, it's added functionality to a service that we're doing now that we really need to do more of, in my mind. And one of the limiting factors on doing it more today is the tubes take time to install and uninstall, and they wear out from time to time, and we have to buy replacement parts and wait for them. So it becomes a nuisance for public works staff, whereas this would be 5 minutes in the course of any one day. Somebody just mounts it and goes away. So we're doing more. It's going to cost us a little bit more, but we'll be able to do what we're doing faster and more of it, and we need more of it. So
I think that's a compelling argument.
So let me just throw my 2 cents worth in here. I understand where you're coming from, Councilwoman Bills. I think we should prioritize everything, but I kind of live in that area of the city, and we're opening up a whole new corridor for traffic. Really, when we finish the, is it Highland Hollow they call it, and we connect that all the way. I think to kind of help the citizens adjust to that, it would be nice to have some firm data. And I think that's what you're looking for, Mayor.
Correct.
There's some firm data on that, because that's going to change the way things move in the south part of the city. So I can see how it's beneficial, and we have issues with the growth in the northwest. I think personally it's money well spent, and I thought the Christmas lights was money well spent, and I think, you know, the work that we've done to kind of prevent flooding up near where you live was money well spent. But, you know, I think as we go into the budgetary process this year, I think you're right. We really do need to prioritize because we have a tight budget. And so I think moving forward, we definitely need to do this. But I do support this. I think there's a compelling argument for it.
So Mayor, when Brittany brought up some things, I guess I didn't realize, how many other counting systems do, you know, it appears the city already owns some traffic data counters at this time.
Correct.
That they put down on the road, and they have to, if you say they nail them down in the, how many does the city currently own?
we have 2 sets, right?
So you could still use those in the summer weather, right? If you needed to.
Todd, is it just in the winter, those are really hard to use, or do we have them get beat up? I mean, as you look at the 2, one looks like it's going to be mounted to catch the data versus one that trips the data.
There are pros and cons to both. The mayor is absolutely correct that right now the ones that we have are problematic. I mean, if we are continually asked to use these, we only put them out there when there's an issue. And we've used them a lot in the last 3 years. The tubes we're constantly replacing. We do have to nail them down. So if we're going to be continually using these and monitoring traffic and trying to keep up with, you know, doing our own traffic studies internal, then we probably ought to invest in these. If we move forward and we just do traffic studies on occasion, and you know, we could do what the mayor is saying and hire a firm like CRS, or there's a number of firms that would do it for us. But if we're continually going to count traffic, this is a good idea. The only downfall of these is you have to put them in a location where you can mount them
Correct, it's
on a
mountable.
pole. And so the good thing about the ones that we put across with the tubes, you can put them virtually anywhere.
But we still have those, so we could put the mount, if we got these, you could use mountable ones versus the tube. It
But
doesn't
I really do like the idea of having these because it gives us a whole nother option of doing them in the winter and not having to put down the tubes, and so they'll be very helpful that way.
You know, so I'm just looking big picture. You know, Scott, over by, thank you, Todd. Over by your neighborhood, we're going to be seeing a lot heavier density come, which we might have. We're by the high school. I see the sensitivity. I guess I remember hearing in the residents coming in as we were looking at Canal Boulevard going by the Reinhardt property. They were nervous about the speed and the traffic there, and we're going to be opening up that section of also Highland. I mean, we've got the one that's going to be the Canal Boulevard, the continuation down to 6800.
And a major corridor.
We have, you know, Todd, 6800, I got to tell you, I'm so confused when I come up past that stake center. Me and my wife every time go, which lines are we supposed to follow? I mean, tonight, I actually kind of pulled off. They says, I'm wondering, do people get over to the right as they come up 6800? Are they supposed to stay in the middle? And every car stayed in the middle, but my wife keeps telling me I'm supposed to be on the right-hand side. I mean, it's really confusing how our lines are there. Just
Thank you, Kurt. I am the same way. I'm to the right, Lance is in the middle. I think I'm off.
Me and my wife have that conversation every time we come from Costco, and I'm going, honey, you got to get over. And I go, which lane am I supposed to be in? So it's really confusing up. So coming back to your traffic, I can see 6800 is going to be a concern. You know, we have Highland Boulevard's concern, 118th North's a concern, 40. I mean, and so I guess I would probably lean in favor of having these because I think this data is going to be important for our residents. It seems to be over the 3 years I've been on, it's something that everyone keeps coming back is traffic's bad, speed is a concern, any development that comes in, they always bring up, you're going to destroy my neighborhood, which there's some concerns, and if we can mitigate the concern, we need to look at some softening, you know, in there to mitigate. You know, if that road from Canal becomes the main road for Costco, we need to mitigate somehow to take care of that issue.
Yeah.
So thank you. I think that was super helpful. I mean, I think you've convinced me that it's a priority. That was much more helpful than just thinking that they were there to collect data, but thinking about all the ways that we can use it more effectively, the data, that makes more sense to me.
You know, Brittany, everyone's going to laugh when I bring this one up because I'm a Christmas light guy. I think we have to be careful on the Christmas lights. To this year, I thought because of COVID, it probably was important to brighten the season. Does that make sense? I think people maybe could be a little bit depressed. We have a lot of homes in Highland that do decorate pretty heavy, and so we do see a lot of lights throughout Highland. I mean, there were some homes up there off 6,000 West behind that stake center that were just gorgeously done with an automation. If you missed it, you missed a really nice display, and there's some others throughout Highland. But, you know, as we look, you ask, is this appropriate? And I think we have to look. Now, those were a purchase of the lights. I mean, I want, if someone, you know, ever reads this, that first, what we're approving is also an asset that we can use in a future time period and going forward. I don't think that the purchase or the cost to go up, but I think we always have to say, is this a need that the city has at this time? And that comes back to what you always are talking about. Is this something that we have as a need? Is this, you know, and it's always hard when we're approving large budgets. You go, because I'm a business, can I go and get a hold of that contractor and squeeze them down another 10%? You know, my question, to be very open with you, on Spring Creek, we had Spring Creek up there. When it very first came in at $550,000 in the budget, I thought it was ridiculously cost for 2 acres. I couldn't see us ever spending it. And I think, Nathan, after all said and done, we're at 510. And I still can't understand how the city spent $510,000 for a 2-acre park. It came out, we got the bids, I recognize all the engineering. It's a totally different project than what I would do at my home. Meaning, my home, you kind of draw it out, hey, put the sprinklers here. It's a simple process where I appreciated the park, but that's some of the process. It's hard. It's been really hard for me cost-wise. I mean, I think, Scott, you've been there where I'm just going, are we crazy? You know, there's some things we got to keep questioning. Is this the correct thing to be spending on? So, Brittany, I appreciate you bringing the question up.
Well, and now that I caused that big ruckus, I would make a motion that we that we adopt the proposed resolution and approve the fiscal year 2021 mid-year budget adjustments.
Amending the traffic counters to 6,000, right?
Because we had
And adding my firm
16,000, so
support
we
of
just saved
traffic counters.
$10,000.
I'll second that.
Motion by Brittany, second by Kurt. Ready to vote? So while we're voting, we did save $10,000.
Yes.
We raised the, it's like stars raising the price before the sale, right? All right, that passes unanimous. All right. Last item on the agenda is council communication items. Does anybody have anything they want to add?
Can I just ask a quick question from Todd? It's not on the agenda, but we've talked a little bit about the east-west corridors. We're finishing to be paid probably in a couple months. Can you just explain to me what sort of barrier you're going to have between the actual road and the Murdoch Canal Trail, which runs along the north? Is there going to be like guardrails or some sort of barrier so that people don't go flipping off that road into the trail?
No, the plan is to have curb and gutter, and
Yes,
then
it's there.
4 feet of rock mulch, so cobblestone, and then the trail. That's the
So
plan.
is there, as you come down the slope and you got the trail down below the highway, is there any guardrail up on that as you go up over that slope?
No.
Isn't there any concern that people go off that road and end up on the trail?
I mean, there's always concern, very similar to any trail that we have along our collector roads. I mean, we have trails up Beacon Hills Boulevard, and we have trails up Highland Boulevard, very near. And knock on wood, we haven't had a pedestrian accident on any of that.
Which is true, but you've got a big slope down there. I mean, I live there and look at it every day. I mean, we're going to see it a lot. I just wondered if there was some risk going around the curve, going up the slope. You got a trail down below it. I can just see a car rolling down and
Well, the westbound traffic coming down that is, if they were to slide at all, they would actually slide to the south. And we have a super elevation on the road as well that keeps them from doing that. But Kurt, the slopes that we have on Canal Boulevard are very similar to what we would have on Highland Boulevard or Beacon Hills. Anywhere that you have slopes, we try to keep it at 8% or less. And in fact, those slopes over there are 6. And so, yes, it's always a concern, but the current design falls within the limits of design criteria, so.
Well, I understand the design. I'm just wondering why there isn't like going to be a guardrail.
A guardrail,
So,
it's just, I mean, I shouldn't say cost, but those types of things are looked at, and they just feel like with the slope that we have on the road itself and the separation up near the curve and the really steep slope, the trail is actually quite a ways down, but you would go down off that embankment. But down where the trail is actually next to the road, it's flat or even an incline going back up the other way with traffic near the pedestrians, if that makes sense.
On the south side, you have the sewer lift station right there.
Right.
Any concern a car will run off and hit the sewer lift station?
No, once again, it's down off the slope. I mean, if that ever happens, you know, it's very similar to any other collector road we have. We have, you know, utilities and things and trails along. I mean, like SR 74 has a trail all the way along it as well. And so it's always a concern when you put pedestrians near a road, and that's why we've set it off as much as we could. We were given a specific footprint. I would have liked to have more property on that north side, but it is what it is, and we pushed it as far south as we could, so.
Well, I appreciate that. I just wondered about guardrails.
Just to update, are you thinking that's going to be paved, and when will residents be able to drive? I mean,
we have it on the schedule to pave that as soon as the asphalt plants open up in April. So we are hoping to have a big open ribbon cutting ceremony first to middle of May.
tell you, I'm going to walk quick on that part of the trail.
Mayor, just maybe
Or
a
run.
little bit of update on Dry Creek, and I know we need to be done by 10. Lehigh at this time has approved a concession stand down at the bottom. They are planning to put in some concessions with an actual building, and so but that will be probably in steps. They might, at the very first, only do gravel parking lot because of budget concerns, and then come back and pave at a later date.
So will it be open this summer?
They have said that they do anticipate it being open in April. As I look and been down there, I would question if it meets it. The trail that's on the Highland side, so those are aware that the Dry Creek Lake is divided, and one half is in Lehigh City, one other half is in Highland City. It's all owned by the North Utah County Conservancy Water District, so that's the property owner, and Lehigh has a lease from them, there's lease in the ground. They did put the trail on the east side of the lake in the wrong spot at the very first, but they've now went back in and tried to correct that, and so it'll be kind of interesting as that opens up, since they've already kind of cut another trail. But the residents are a little concerned about the parking. They're concerned it's going to be trespassing. I know the North Utah County Water Conservancy District's worked out most of the property line easement issues where there was some carryover on both surveys, and they're supposed to be putting fences up on that. And they've been working with public safety from the fire department. Some are talking about putting sprinklers on top of the fence that goes in, that if they are very concerned about a fire coming up from that area, and if they had it, they'd have all those sprinklers that would kick on. I know Chief Thompson's been talking to the residents along there. But Dry Creek Lake's coming. People are excited. At this time, Lehigh's still trying to decide if they might charge a user fee that is be assessed to build a park down there. It should be noted in our agreement, it stated that Highland residents would be treated the same as a Lehigh resident if they bring about a user fee. If you remember that, Scott, we
I remember that
we put that in there. They have talked about getting some money from the tourism board, maybe to kind of help, but if they do that, one of the things tourism's talked about, it has to be open to everyone in Utah County if the tourism money's used. And so that was one of the debates that I know Lehigh City is trying to decide if they're going to take that money. If they do, they can't charge a fee. If they don't take the money, they could charge a fee. So, but Dry Creek Lake is coming.
Cool.
Not Utah County that's the problem. That lake. It's not going to be Utah County using that lake. Salt Lake.
Any other communication items? In that case, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mayor, I move that we adjourn our city council meeting.
I second it.
Motion by Kurt, second by Scott.